In today's busy world, it can be hard to find rest, both for the body and the heart. But the gentle teachings of the Buddha remind us that peace and healing are always possible. These Buddhist teachings, shared with kindness and calm, help quiet the mind and heal the emotions. Each one offers a simple truth, guiding us to let go of stress, release worries, and feel safe in the present moment. With patience and care, they show us that deep sleep and emotional healing begin from within, and that true peace is always close. Let go of what you cannot control. In the peaceful shade of a fig tree, the Buddha once sat quietly as a storm gathered in the distance. A troubled villager approached him, his eyes heavy with sorrow. He had lost his crops to flood, his son had left home in anger, and his wife no longer spoke to him with warmth. With tears in his eyes, he asked, "Why does everything in my life keep going wrong? I've tried so hard to fix it all. Why can't I control what happens?" The Buddha listened without interrupting. Then, gently, he picked up a leaf from the ground and said, "Imagine carrying every leaf in this forest. Could you do it?" The man shook his head, confused. The Buddha continued, "You are trying to carry every leaf, every fear, every change, every decision made by others. But some things are like the wind, beyond your grasp, and when you try to hold the wind, you only tire your spirit." He told the man the story of a fisherman who once stood on the riverbank during a heavy storm. The waters rose, and he shouted at the river to calm down, but the river paid him no mind. In his anger, he threw his net, and it tangled in the weeds. He lost not only the fish, but also his strength. Nearby, another man watched quietly. He waited until the storm passed, then gently placed his net in the water and brought home a catch. The Buddha explained that the wise man did not try to control the river. He waited, trusted, and worked with what the moment gave him. As the villager listened, a silence grew within him, one that softened his chest and loosened the tightness in his throat. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own resistance. He had been trying to control the hearts of others, the moods of the sky, and the turning of the seasons. But the more he clung, the more he suffered. The Buddha placed the leaf in the man's hand and said, "Let go of what is not yours to carry." And in that moment, as the wind brushed gently through the trees, the man finally allowed himself to breathe. Observe thoughts without attachment. One quiet evening near the banks of the Ganges, the Buddha was resting beneath a neem tree when a young monk approached him with worry written across his face. "Master," the monk began, "when I sit in meditation, my mind becomes wild. Thoughts rise like waves. I try to stop them, but they keep coming. I feel like I'm failing." The Buddha looked up at the darkening sky, where clouds drifted slowly past the moon. "Do you try to stop the clouds from moving?" he asked. The monk shook his head. "Then why fight the movement of your thoughts?" the Buddha asked gently. "Thoughts are like clouds. They come and go. Let them pass. Just observe them, and they will lose their power." He told a story about a man who had once lived near a busy road. Every time someone passed, the man would step outside and shout at them to be quiet. Day after day, his life became filled with anger because the road never stopped being busy. One day, an old traveler came by and asked the man why he did not simply close his door and allow the sounds to be sounds. "The road is not yours to silence," the traveler said. but your peace is yours to protect." The monk listened as the Buddha continued. "Your thoughts are like those travelers on the road. Some are loud, some quiet, some stay for a moment, some for longer. But none of them are you. You are the one watching. You are the open sky, not the passing clouds." As the monk sat quietly, he realized how hard he had been fighting his own mind. He had believed that every thought needed to be chased or silenced, that every image meant something, that every worry needed solving. But he saw now that it was this struggle, not the thoughts themselves, that caused his suffering. He closed his eyes under the night sky and did not try to stop anything. He watched each thought rise and fall like leaves floating downstream, and in that stillness he found peace, not because the mind had stopped, but because he had stopped clinging to it. Be gentle with your inner critic. One morning in the quiet garden of Jetavana, the Buddha was approached by a novice monk who looked downcast. The young man knelt before him and said, "Master, I am not good enough. I forget my chants. My mind wanders during meditation. I am not like the others. I feel like I'm failing you and failing myself." The Buddha looked at him with calm eyes and asked, "When a bird stumbles while learning to fly, do we scold the bird? When a flower takes time to bloom, do we call it weak?" The monk looked up, eyes wide, unsure how to answer. The Buddha told him a story of a boy who was raised by a harsh father. The man believed that constant criticism would build strength. So, every time the boy made a mistake, spilling water, missing a word, dropping a tool, he was scolded, sometimes even laughed at. Over time, the boy grew quiet. Even when no one was around, he would whisper cruel things to himself. He had learned to carry the voice of his father in his own mind. Years later, the boy became a man and traveled to meet the Buddha. He wanted to find peace, but didn't know how. After listening to the man's story, the Buddha placed his hand gently on his shoulder and said, "You have kept a fire burning in your mind, thinking it would keep you safe. But now it only burns you. Let it go. Be the voice you never heard. Speak to yourself the way a kind teacher would speak to a struggling student." The young monk felt his heart ache as he listened. He had believed that harshness would push him to improve, but all it had brought him was shame. He realized his inner critic wasn't wise. It was just old pain repeating itself. The Buddha continued, "If a child were to come to you crying, would you strike him? Or would you kneel beside him, speak gently, and remind him he is loved? You must learn to treat your own heart the same way." The monk bowed his head, and for the first time he did not scold himself for feeling broken. He simply allowed the tenderness to rise, and he held it close, like a small flame that needed protecting. Cultivate loving kindness for yourself. In a quiet monastery nestled in the hills of Savatthi, a young nun sat weeping beside a lotus pond. Though she had memorized many sutras and followed every rule with devotion, she could not silence the voice inside her that whispered, "You are not enough." The Buddha came upon her and sat beside the water without speaking. The nun wiped her tears quickly, ashamed of being seen in her pain. "I have failed," she said softly. "My heart feels heavy. I show kindness to others, but I cannot give it to myself. I feel unworthy." The Buddha picked up a lotus flower and held it gently. This flower grows in muddy water, yet it is not ashamed of where it came from. Its beauty comes from its journey through the mud. He shared a story of a woman who spent her life caring for others. She gave food to the hungry, medicine to the sick, and comfort to the grieving. Yet when she fell ill, she refused help. She believed she did not deserve the same kindness she gave so freely. Her body weakened, not from illness alone, but from a heart closed to itself. One evening, a monk came to visit her. He said, "When a lamp gives light to others but forgets to refill its own oil, it flickers and fades. Why should you be any different?" The Buddha turned to the nun beside him. "You have tended to your practice like a gardener, but even a gardener must water her own roots." He guided her to place her hand on her heart and quietly repeat, "May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be at ease." At first, the words felt strange, even selfish. But as she continued, something began to soften. The harsh voice inside her grew quieter, and in its place, a gentle warmth began to bloom, like the first light of dawn touching the petals of a lotus. The Buddha said, "When you give loving kindness to yourself, you do not take away from others. You only deepen the well from which you give." And under the sky, lit by stars and reflection, the nun learned that to truly walk the path of compassion, she must first offer that compassion inward. Embrace impermanence before sleep. As twilight settled over the hills of Sravasti, the monks prepared for evening meditation. The air was cool, the lamps flickered gently, and the world seemed to soften with the coming night. A weary villager sat near the edge of the monastery, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. He had come to the Buddha with a restless heart. "My days feel heavy," he said. "I worry about what I've lost, and fear what I might lose next. I cannot sleep. My mind clings to everything, my family, my home, my work, my regrets. How do I let go?" The Buddha sat beside him in silence for a moment, watching the last light fade. Then he picked up a lotus petal that had fallen to the ground. He held it gently and said, "This petal was once part of a perfect bloom. Today it falls. Tomorrow it will return to the soil, and yet, in its falling, it is no less beautiful." He told the man a story of a woman named Kisa Gotami, whose child had died suddenly. In her grief, she carried the lifeless body through the village, begging for medicine. No one could help her until she reached the Buddha. He told her to bring a mustard seed from a house that had never known sorrow. She went from door to door, but each home had its own story of loss. She returned with no seed, but her heart was changed. Through the pain, she had awakened to the truth. All things must pass. Each night, the Buddha said, is like the falling petal, a reminder that today cannot be held. Whatever brought you joy or sorrow must be released. Sleep is not just rest. It is a surrender, a small death before the morning's rebirth. The villager listened, tears quietly escaping his eyes. He realized he had been fighting the natural flow of life, trying to hold on to things that were already drifting away. The past was a shadow, the future an illusion. But this moment, this quiet breath before sleep, was real. As darkness wrapped the land, the villager laid down with a different heart. He whispered to himself, "This too shall pass." And for the first time in many nights, his body softened, his mind let go, and he allowed the world to change without fear. Release, clinging to the day's events. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the monastery, the Buddha gathered with his disciples for evening meditation. One of them, a middle-aged man named Sona, shifted restlessly. His breath was uneven, his posture tight. After the session ended, he approached the Buddha and bowed low. "Master," he said, "my mind is full of the day's failures. I made mistakes in my chores. I forgot the morning chant, and I spoke harshly to a fellow monk. These thoughts won't let me rest. I feel ashamed and trapped in what I cannot undo." The Buddha looked toward the darkening sky, where the stars began to emerge. "Sona," he said gently, "if a traveler insists on carrying every stone he finds along the road, will he not grow weary before he reaches his journey's end?" Sona nodded slowly, his eyes cast downward. The Buddha then told a story of a man who, each night, walked through the forest carrying a heavy sack of rocks. When asked why he carried them, the man replied, "These are the stones I found throughout my day. I cannot forget them, so I take them home." Each morning, the man woke exhausted. His body ached, and his spirit was heavy. One evening, an old woman saw him and said, "You are not meant to carry every moment. Some things must be set down when the day ends." The Buddha paused, letting the silence speak. "Sona," he said, "you too are carrying your day like a bag of stones. But the past does not follow you unless you carry it. The sun does not hold on to its light. It sets and rests and rises again." Sona's shoulders dropped, and a long breath escaped him, as though he had been holding it since sunrise. The Buddha continued, "Before sleep, empty your hands. Forgive the day. Let the errors, the words, the unmet expectations dissolve like footprints in sand. Rest is not earned by perfection. It is given freely to those who are willing to receive it." That night, Sona sat beneath the moon. He placed his palms on his lap, and with each breath imagined letting go, of guilt, of striving, of every small wound the day had left behind. And as he did, the tightness within him softened. The day slipped away, and for the first time in many nights, he began to feel the stillness waiting beneath it all. Use breath as an anchor to the present. One humid afternoon in the forest near Vaishali, the Buddha sat quietly beneath a sal tree, surrounded by disciples. The wind was still, the air thick with heat, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of birdsong and breath. A young monk broke the silence with a trembling voice. "Master," he said, "my thoughts keep running to the past. Things I've done, people I've hurt. And then I leap ahead, worrying about what might happen tomorrow. I try to meditate, but my mind pulls me everywhere. I feel like I'm drowning in my own thoughts." The Buddha looked at him with deep compassion and replied, "When a man is drowning, he does not try to chase the clouds. He reaches for something solid, something close, something real." He then told the story of a farmer who fell into a river during a storm. As the waters carried him downstream, he fought, flailed, and cried out. But the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Then his hand brushed against a floating log. He grabbed hold, held still, and let the river carry him gently to shore. "The breath," the Buddha said, "is your log. It is always here. It asks nothing. It judges nothing. It simply is. When your thoughts scream and the mind spins in all directions, return to your breath. It is the present moment made visible." The monk closed his eyes as the Buddha spoke, listening to his own breathing for the first time, not as a habit, but as a refuge, in and out, no future, no past, just this gentle rhythm, always waiting to guide him home. The Buddha continued, "We live most of our lives in places we cannot touch, regrets, fears, memories, and hopes. But peace lives here, in the chest, rising and falling with each breath. It does not need you to fix anything. It only asks that you notice." And as the sun lowered behind the trees, the monk began to feel the weight in his chest lift, not because his problems were gone, but because he had found a way to stop drifting. He breathed again and again, like a traveler placing his feet back on solid ground. In that moment, he was not lost. He was here, and that was enough. Recognize suffering without resistance. One rainy afternoon in the forest near Vulture Peak, the Buddha sat beneath a broad tree, his robes damp from the mist. A young man named Ananda approached, his face pale with grief. He had just lost his sister to illness, and the pain in his chest felt unbearable. "Master," he whispered, "I can't bear this sorrow. It rises like fire in me. I try to fight it, push it away, but it only grows stronger. What am I doing wrong?" The Buddha looked at him with deep compassion. "You are suffering, Ananda, but it is not the pain alone that hurts you. It is your resistance to it." He told Ananda a story of a man who was once struck by an arrow. The man cried out not just from the wound, but from the fear, the anger, the denial that it had happened at all. He shouted, "Why me?" and demanded to know who shot it, why it hurt so much, and when it would end. In all his shouting, he did not allow the healer to approach. Another man, also struck by an arrow, sat silently and acknowledged the pain. He did not pretend it wasn't there, nor did he demand it leave at once. He breathed into the ache and allowed the healer to work. Though the pain was real, his peace remained untouched. The Buddha turned to Ananda. "You have been struck by the arrow of loss, but you are also piercing yourself again and again with the arrow of resistance. You say, 'This should not be, I should not feel this way.' But suffering is part of being alive. The rain falls, whether we welcome it or not." Ananda's hands trembled in his lap. Tears slid down his face, not from struggle now, but from the slow surrender to the truth. He realized he had been trying to outthink his pain, to silence it with strength, but pain does not vanish through force. It softens through presence. The Buddha continued, "When you allow suffering to simply be, without tightening, without fleeing, you create space for healing to enter. Like clouds passing through the sky, sorrow too moves on, if you let it." And so Ananda sat beneath the dripping leaves, no longer trying to escape the grief in his chest. He breathed with it, not against it. And in that raw stillness, a quiet comfort began to unfold, something deeper than relief, something closer to peace. Rest in the space between thoughts. In the deep stillness of a moonlit night, the Buddha once sat beside a quiet lake in the outskirts of Kosambi. The surface of the water was perfectly still, reflecting the stars like tiny lamps floating in the sky. A monk sat nearby, troubled and fidgeting, unable to find peace in his meditation. "Master," he whispered, "I watch my thoughts as you taught, but they come one after another. There is no end. I feel like I'm caught in a storm of words and images. I don't know how to find silence." The Buddha dipped his hand into the water, then let it drip slowly back into the lake. "When rain falls," he said, "each drop ripples, then fades. Between the ripples, the water returns to stillness. That stillness is always there. You just have to see it." He told a story of a musician who was obsessed with sound. She practiced day and night, searching for the perfect melody. One day, her teacher sat her down and said, "Play one note, then pause. Listen to the silence before the next. Music is not made of sound alone, but of the space between the sounds." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Your mind is like that. The thoughts are notes. But between them, if you stop chasing, there is a quiet space. It is small at first, like a crack of light in a dark room. But if you learn to rest there, even for a breath, you will touch something deeper than thought." The monk closed his eyes and began again. A thought rose. "I'm not doing this right." He let it come, then watched it pass. A second thought appeared. "I need to try harder." He watched again, and then, for a brief moment, no thought, just space, just a gentle pause, like the breath held between an inhale and exhale. In that pause, he felt a peace that was not forced, a quiet that didn't need effort. He realized he had been trying to escape his thoughts, fight them, fix them, but all he needed was to notice the stillness that was already there, waiting behind the noise. He breathed in the silence, and in that breath he found a moment of true rest. Feel emotions without judgment. One evening, in the calm of the meditation hall, a young disciple named Kema sat quietly, her eyes closed, but her face tense. The Buddha noticed her stillness was not peaceful. It was strained, as if she were holding something inside. After the session, she approached him hesitantly and said, "Master, during meditation, I felt anger and sadness rising. I tried to push them away, but they wouldn't leave. I feel ashamed for feeling these things. I thought I was supposed to be beyond them." The Buddha looked at her with kindness and said, "When a cloud forms in the sky, do we judge it for not being sunlight? When thunder rolls across the mountains, do we say it has failed to be quiet?" He told her the story of a monk who believed true wisdom meant feeling only calm and joy. One day, as he meditated under a tree, a wave of jealousy arose in him. He was shocked, embarrassed that such an emotion still lived inside. He tried to suppress it, scolded himself, and sat longer and harder in meditation. But the more he fought the feeling, the stronger it became. Later, the monk confessed to the Buddha, expecting to be corrected. But the Buddha only smiled and said, "You are not wrong for feeling. You are human. Emotions come and go like guests at a gathering. Your task is not to judge them, but to greet them with presence and curiosity." He explained that when we judge our emotions, we build a second layer of suffering. Anger arises, and then we add shame. Sadness appears, and we call ourselves weak. But emotions themselves are not wrong. They are simply signals, passing clouds across the sky of the mind. To feel them without judgment is to make space for them to breathe and move on. Kema lowered her gaze, her shoulders slowly softening. She realized she had been at war with herself, trying to force her heart into stillness by shutting down what it was trying to feel. The Buddha continued, "Allow anger to rise like a flame, but do not feed it. Let sorrow pass through like wind. Say to each, 'I see you,' and offer them the kindness of awareness. In doing so, they lose their power to control you." And so, that night, Kema sat again in silence. When emotion came, she did not push it away. She named it gently, breathed with it, and let it be. And for the first time, the silence within her felt honest, filled not with forced peace, but with true presence. See rest as a form of compassion. One quiet evening in the garden of Anathapindika's monastery, the Buddha walked slowly among the blooming jasmine trees. The air was warm, the sky turning gold, and the earth seemed to exhale after a long day. A devoted lay follower came to him, her face worn with exhaustion. She bowed deeply and said, "Blessed One, I try so hard to serve others, to work, to care for my family, to practice the teachings. But my body is tired, and my heart feels empty. I feel guilty when I rest, as if I am wasting precious time." The Buddha looked at her kindly and said, "Would you ever speak to your child the way you speak to yourself? Would you tell a tired child that she is selfish for sleeping?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. The Buddha sat with her beneath the trees and told her a story of a healer who once gave everything to her village. Day and night she treated the sick, fetched water, and cared for the old. She never stopped to eat properly or sleep fully. Over time, her hands trembled, her breath grew short, and her heart grew bitter. She began to resent those she served. One day, an old monk came to her and said, "You give so much to others, but nothing to yourself. Your kindness to the world is beautiful, but it will wilt like a flower with no roots. Rest is not selfish. It is the soil of compassion." The Buddha turned to the woman and said, "Rest is not laziness. Rest is a soft blessing you offer to your own heart. It is an act of trust in life, a way of saying, 'I deserve to heal too.' When you allow yourself to rest, you are saying to your weary body, 'You are loved.'" The woman closed her eyes, and for the first time in many weeks, she felt the simple sweetness of being still. Her breath slowed, her shoulders softened, the guilt began to melt away. She realized that in all her efforts to do good, she had forgotten the one person she had never offered compassion to, herself. And now, under the evening sky, she gave herself permission to stop, to breathe, and to be held by the silence of rest. Witness the mind, do not chase it. In the early hours before dawn, the monastery lay still, wrapped in silence except for the distant rustling of leaves. A young monk named Tissa sat before the Buddha, his brow furrowed in quiet frustration. "Master," he said, "when I try to meditate, my thoughts scatter like frightened birds. I chase them, try to calm them, but the more I try, the faster they run. I feel like I'm losing the battle with my own mind." The Buddha looked out at the darkness just beginning to soften with light. "Tissa," he said gently, "have you ever tried to catch your reflection in a flowing river?" The monk nodded, unsure. "When you reach into the water," the Buddha said, "your hand only stirs it more. The reflection blurs, but if you stay still, the water clears and the image returns by itself." He then told a story of a man who entered a forest in search of a golden bird. He ran after every sound, chased every flutter, darted through trees, and tore through thickets. Hours passed, and he found nothing but exhaustion. Just as he collapsed in defeat, the golden bird landed quietly beside him. It had been following him all along, but he had been moving too fast to notice. The Buddha explained, "Your mind is like that bird. You cannot catch it by running after it, but if you sit still, it will reveal itself to you. Do not chase your thoughts. Watch them. Like clouds, they form and fade. You are not the cloud. You are the sky." Tissa's eyes softened as he listened. He had believed that stillness meant silencing the mind, controlling every thought, wrestling each idea into quiet. But now he saw the truth, that it was not about conquering the mind, but observing it without fear, without grasping. The Buddha continued, "When you sit, sit like a mountain. Let the winds of the mind pass over you. Watch them. Let them dance. Let them fall. The more you watch without chasing, the more peace begins to rise, not from outside, but from the space within." And so, as the first light of morning touched the horizon, Tissa returned to his cushion. He no longer ran after his thoughts. He watched them rise and drift, like smoke from incense, and for the first time, he felt the quiet beneath their movement. Forgive yourself before you rest. As the last light of day slipped behind the hills of Rajagaha, the monks gathered for evening chanting. The soft hum of voices echoed through the temple grounds like a lullaby to the soul. Among them sat a young monk, his eyes cast low, his breath uneasy. After the chants, he remained seated, unmoving. The Buddha noticed his silence and approached gently. "Why do you not rise with the others?" the Buddha asked. The monk replied, his voice barely a whisper, "Master, I made mistakes before I came here. I hurt people with my words. I took what was not mine. I disrespected my own parents. Even now I struggle. I lose my patience. I think unkind thoughts. How can I close my eyes and rest when I am still carrying so much wrong?" The Buddha knelt beside him and looked up at the moon rising over the trees. "When the moon is reflected in muddy water," he said softly, "do you curse the moon, or do you simply wait for the water to settle?" The monk looked at him, confused but curious. The Buddha told him the story of a man who wandered through a desert with a heavy stone strapped to his back. He believed that by carrying it, he was paying for his past, and that someday he would feel free. But the longer he walked, the more the stone crushed his strength. One day, an old woman passed by and asked him why he chose to suffer. He said, "Because I deserve it." She looked into his eyes and said, "No one heals through punishment. You must forgive the person you once were. Only then will your feet touch the earth again." The Buddha placed a hand over the monk's heart. "When night comes," he said, It is not only the body that needs rest, but also the soul. And no soul can rest while still holding a blade against itself. He told him to close his eyes, to breathe slowly, and to speak gently in his mind. I forgive myself. I am learning. I release this pain. The monk did as he was told. At first, the words felt strange, but with each breath, something inside began to soften, not erasing the past, but loosening its grip. And in that softness, as the stars filled the sky above, he finally felt safe enough to sleep. Offer compassion to those who wronged you. One afternoon in the village of Kosambi, a man came to the Buddha, his eyes red with anger. "Master," he said through clenched teeth, "a friend betrayed me. He spread lies, turned others against me, and left me humiliated. I want to let go, but the pain burns in my chest. How can I forgive someone who caused me so much harm?" The Buddha listened quietly and then asked, "When someone hands you a burning coal and you hold it tightly, who is burned?" The man blinked in confusion. "I am," he replied. The Buddha nodded. "Then why do you hold your anger like a coal, pressed close to your heart?" He told a story of two monks crossing a muddy road. A woman stood nearby, afraid to dirty her fine robes. One monk silently lifted her and carried her across, then set her down and continued walking. Hours later, the other monk turned to him and said, "I can't believe you touched that woman. We are monks. We must keep our vows." The first monk smiled and said, "I put her down at the edge of the road. Why are you still carrying her?" The Buddha turned back to the man. "When someone wrongs you, their action may leave a wound, but it is your holding on to hatred that keeps the wound open." The man lowered his eyes. "But why should I offer compassion to someone who caused me harm?" "Because," the Buddha replied, "they are already suffering. One who harms others is a person deeply disconnected from peace. Compassion is not approval, it is freedom. When you offer it, you cut the chain that ties you to the past. You give yourself back to the present." The man's breath grew slower. His fists, once tight, began to loosen. He realized he had been keeping the fire alive with his own pain, feeding it with every memory, every replay of betrayal. And while the one who wronged him had moved on, he had remained imprisoned. The Buddha spoke once more. "Compassion is not a gift for the other. It is the medicine for your own heart. It allows you to release, to rest, to return to your own peace." And so the man sat by the river, watching the water flow around stones. He did not pretend the wound didn't exist, but he softened around it. And in that softness, the burden began to lift. Feel the weight of your body relaxing into earth. In the quiet hours just after sunset, the Buddha often guided his monks in silent reflection. One such evening, the ground still warm from the day's sun, the Sangha gathered beneath a canopy of stars. A young disciple sat apart, his posture rigid, his breath shallow. Though the night was peaceful, his mind remained tense. The Buddha approached and sat beside him on the earth. "Why do you sit like a soldier before battle?" he asked with a gentle smile. The disciple replied, "Master, I fear if I let go, I will lose control. My thoughts will overtake me. My body feels restless. I cannot settle. It's as if I am fighting sleep, even when I long for it." The Buddha closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. "There is no battle here," he said. "Only a body that longs to return home. Let it." He told the story of a deer who ran for miles, always alert, always fleeing imagined dangers. Even when the forest was calm, the deer stood stiff, waiting for something to go wrong. One day, the deer collapsed, not from harm, but from exhaustion. In that stillness, for the first time, it realized the ground did not betray it. The earth was soft. It held the deer's weight without question. It asked for nothing. It simply received. The Buddha placed his palm on the ground and said, "This earth has held every joy and every sorrow. It asks you to do nothing, to be nothing. It only invites you to rest." He then guided the disciple to lie down slowly. Feel your head supported by the earth. Feel your shoulders drop. Let the muscles in your chest grow heavy. Let your arms fall. Let your belly soften. Your legs, your feet. There is no need to hold anything now. The disciple followed his voice, breath by breath. Each moment, his body sank a little deeper, as if the ground was cradling him. The tension that once curled in his neck and chest began to unwind. There was no pressure to be mindful, no need to be strong, just a quiet surrender. And in that surrender, something shifted, not just in his body, but in his heart. He realized he had spent his life carrying things that the earth was willing to hold for him. At last, he let go, and the silence of the ground welcomed him like a mother welcoming her child home. End the day with gratitude, not regret. As twilight settled over the grove of Anathapindika's park, the monks prepared for their evening reflection. One young monk, Suddha, lingered behind, his eyes fixed on the fading sun. The Buddha noticed the boy's heavy silence and approached him with calm steps. "Why do you sit alone with sorrow?" the Buddha asked gently. Suddha lowered his head. "Today I wasted time. I was short-tempered with another monk. I missed my afternoon meditation. Now the day is over, and I can't go back and change it. I feel like I failed." The Buddha looked toward the horizon, where the last light touched the tops of the trees. "Do you curse the sun for setting too soon, or do you give thanks for the warmth it gave before it left?" Suddha looked up, uncertain. The Buddha sat beside him and told a story. There was once a farmer who, at the end of each day, stood by his field counting his mistakes. He would mutter to himself about weeds he had missed, crops he had damaged, and water he had spilled. His heart grew bitter, and sleep never came easily. In the same village lived an old woman. She too worked hard in her garden and often made errors, forgot to water some plants, tripped and spilled seeds. But each evening she would kneel beside her lantern and say, "Today I did what I could. Thank you for the lessons, for the sun, for the breath in my chest." And she would smile, no matter how imperfect the day had been. The Buddha turned to Suddha. "Regret is the mind clinging to what has already passed, but gratitude is the heart opening to what remains. When we end the day in regret, we go to sleep with weight on our chest. But when we end it with gratitude, we rest with lightness in our soul." Suddha's eyes filled with quiet tears. He had spent so much time replaying what went wrong, he had missed all that still went right. The kindness he gave in the morning, the food he helped prepare, the very breath he still carried. The Buddha placed a hand over the monk's heart. Close the day not with punishment, but with thanks. Thank the day for teaching you. Thank your faults for showing you the way forward. And then let it rest. As the stars began to shine above, Suda whispered his gratitude to the night, and the silence around him finally felt soft. Accept that all beings seek peace. In the soft morning light outside the bamboo grove at Rajagaha, the Buddha was sweeping a quiet path with a simple broom. A group of monks watched from a distance, surprised that their teacher would take on such a humble task. One of them approached and asked, "Master, why do you do this yourself when we can do it for you?" The Buddha looked up, his eyes calm, and said, "Because even in sweeping, one can understand the heart of the world." Later that day, a troubled monk came forward. He was known for his anger, quick-tempered, often harsh with others in the Sangha. That morning, he had shouted at another monk during alms round. Ashamed, he came to the Buddha with his head bowed low. "Master," he said, "I cannot seem to change. People frustrate me. Some are selfish, others cruel. I want to feel kindness, but my heart closes too fast." The Buddha sat beside him and asked, "Have you ever seen a wounded animal strike out in fear?" The monk nodded. "Did you hate it for lashing out?" "No," the monk said softly. "I felt sorry for it." The Buddha told him the story of a thief who once followed the Sangha, mocking the monks and throwing stones from a distance. When the thief was finally caught, the villagers brought him before the Buddha in anger, but the Buddha only asked him one question: "What are you running from?" The thief began to cry. He had known nothing but pain since childhood. In the silence that followed, he dropped to his knees, not because he was punished, but because, for the first time, someone saw his suffering instead of his actions. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Every being, even those who cause harm, seeks peace. Some look for it in wealth, others in power, others in control. They may be mistaken, but their heart longs for safety, for ease, for freedom from pain. The angry man, the greedy man, the one who lashes out, they are reaching blindly for the same peace you seek, with open hands." The monk sat with this truth, and something within him softened. He began to see others not as enemies or problems, but as weary travelers, lost in different ways. Even those who wounded him were simply seeking peace in places where it could not be found. And in that understanding, his own heart took its first real step toward it. Let dreams arise and dissolve. Late one night, in the stillness of the forest, the Buddha sat beneath a canopy of stars. A young disciple named Renu approached, his face caught in a strange mix of wonder and fear. "Master," he said quietly, "my dreams disturb me. Some are beautiful, of flying, of peace, of seeing you in radiant light. Others are dark and frightening. When I wake, I feel confused. What do they mean? Why can't I hold on to the good ones and avoid the bad?" The Buddha looked up at the moon and smiled gently. "Renu, when you look into a pond, do you try to trap the reflection of the moon in your hands?" "No, Master," Renu replied. "It would slip through my fingers." "Exactly," said the Buddha. "Dreams are like reflections in water. They arise from the depths of your mind and dissolve back into it. They are not yours to keep or to fear. They are clouds passing across the sky of sleep." The Buddha then shared the story of a prince who dreamed each night of becoming a great king. In his dreams, he was praised, powerful, beloved. Each morning, he woke longing to return to that world. Then one night, his dreams turned dark. He saw the kingdom burning, his people fleeing, his throne crumbling beneath him. He woke, trembling. He went to a wise hermit and asked, "Which dream should I follow, the dream of my greatness or the dream of my downfall?" The hermit answered, "Neither. Both are illusions. Your dreams are not promises nor prophecies. They are movements of the mind. Do not build your life on them, and do not fear their shadows." The Buddha turned to Renu. "The mind weaves pictures in the night, just as it does in the day. But you are not those pictures. You are the awareness that watches. Let dreams come, and let them go. Do not chase the sweetness or resist the fear. Simply witness and return to peace." Renu sat beside his teacher, his breath becoming slow. He realized that in clinging to dreams, both joyful and terrifying, he had given them power over his waking heart. But now he understood. Dreams are visitors, not truths. They do not define him. And as he closed his eyes beneath the stars, he no longer reached for the dreams that came. He simply let them pass, soft like mist at dawn, trusting that who he truly was did not rise or fall with them. Listen deeply to silence. One early morning, long before the village stirred, the Buddha walked alone through a dew-covered field. The sky was pale and wide, and not even the birds had begun their song. A young monk followed at a distance, careful not to disturb the stillness. When the Buddha stopped beside a small pond, the monk came forward and bowed. "Master," he said, "I sit in meditation as you teach, but I always feel the urge to fill the space, with thoughts, with chants, with effort. The silence feels empty, even frightening. What am I missing?" The Buddha knelt at the edge of the water and touched its surface gently with his fingertips. Ripples moved outward, then vanished. "Most people fear silence," he said, "because they have never truly listened to it. They believe it means nothing is there. But silence is not empty. It is full. It holds everything that noise cannot teach." He then told the story of a man who lived in a busy city, surrounded by noise from morning until night. When he finally visited the monastery, the quiet unsettled him. He paced. He spoke too much. He searched for distraction. Then, one evening, he wandered into the forest alone. He sat beside a stream and listened, not to the birds, not to the breeze, but to the silence between the sounds. And there, he heard something he never had before. His own heart, no longer speaking in words, but simply being. In that stillness, he felt seen, by nothing, by everything. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "When you listen to silence, you are not waiting for something to happen. You are returning to what is already here. Beneath the layers of thought, beneath fear and hope and memory, there is a stillness. It is not made by you. It has always been waiting." The monk closed his eyes as the wind passed softly over the grass. He noticed the silence, not as a gap between sounds, but as a presence that cradled them all. It was gentle, open, endlessly patient. In it, there was no pressure to be anything, no need to fix or understand. just being. And as he breathed in that quiet, he felt himself dissolve into it. No longer a monk trying to meditate, just a soul resting in the soundless arms of peace. Return to the breath when the mind wanders. One quiet afternoon in the shade of a fig tree, the Buddha led a group of monks in meditation. The air was still, the birds silent, but one monk, Nanda, fidgeted with his robe and sighed. After the session, he approached the Buddha with a troubled look. "Master," he said, "I try to focus, but my mind keeps wandering. I think about home, about the past, about things I haven't done. I feel like a failure. I keep losing my way." The Buddha looked at him with gentle eyes and asked, "Nanda, when a bird flies from its branch, do you scold it for returning?" Nanda blinked, confused. "No, Master. I'd be glad it returned." The Buddha nodded. "Then do the same with your mind. Do not scold it when it strays. Greet it like a bird coming home and guide it back to the breath." He told a story of a man who set out to cross a vast desert. He tied a thread to a stone at the start of his journey. Each time he wandered from his path, he looked back and followed the thread to where he had begun. He did not curse the desert for being wide or himself for losing direction. He simply returned again and again until he reached the other side. The Buddha placed his hand gently on Nanda's shoulder. "The breath is your thread. It is always here, waiting, no matter how far the mind travels. The moment you return to it, you are already home." Nanda felt a deep warmth in his chest, something soft, forgiving. He realized he had been turning meditation into a battle, believing every wandering thought meant he was doing it wrong. But now he saw it differently. The wandering was not failure. The return was the practice. The Buddha continued, "The mind is like a child curious about the world. It will run, tumble, chase noise. But your breath is the gentle hand that says, 'Come back now.' And you come back, not with anger, but with kindness." That night, as Nanda sat again beneath the stars, thoughts still came and went like wind through leaves, but he no longer followed them. Each time he noticed himself drifting, he smiled inwardly and returned to the breath, soft, steady, alive. And in that return, he found his peace. Abandon the need to solve everything. Tonight, in the cool hush of twilight, the monastery at Vulture Peak grew still. The wind had quieted, the lamps were lit, and most of the monks had begun to settle into evening rest. But one remained pacing outside the Buddha's quarters, his brow furrowed, his breath quick. When the Buddha stepped outside, he found the young monk walking in circles, clutching a small scroll in his hand. "Master," the monk said anxiously, "I can't sleep. My mind keeps turning. I haven't completed my studies. I haven't mastered my breath. I spoke harshly today. I feel like I'm falling behind. I keep thinking, if I don't figure it all out now, I never will." The Buddha looked at him quietly, then gestured to the sky above them. "Do you see the moon?" he asked. The monk nodded. "Is it trying to shine brighter than it is?" "No," the monk whispered. "Then why?" the Buddha asked gently. "Do you demand that your mind be more than what it is in this moment?" He sat with the monk beneath a tree, the night stretching wide around them. He told him a story of a man who wandered into a forest to collect firewood. As the sky darkened, he grew afraid. Shadows stretched long, and he could no longer see the path. Determined to make it home, he ran faster, pushing through branches, stumbling over roots. But the more he rushed, the more lost he became. Finally, breathless and aching, he stopped beneath a tree. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and waited for the moon to rise. When it did, the path revealed itself, quiet, clear, and just as it had always been. Your mind, the Buddha said, is like that forest. When you rush to solve everything, you stir up dust. But when you pause, when you stop demanding answers, the clarity will come on its own. You do not need to fix your life before sleep. Let the night hold your worries. Let the darkness carry your burdens. The monk listened, and his shoulders slowly eased. He looked up again at the moon, not as a task, not as a goal, but as a gentle presence. And for the first time that day, he allowed himself to simply be, not solved, not perfect, just resting, just breathing, just enough. Feel each inhale as life, each exhale as release. As evening fell across the silent hills of Rajagaha, the monks gathered for quiet meditation. Among them sat an elderly man named Vapa, his breaths shallow and tight. After the sitting ended, he remained with eyes closed, trembling slightly. When he finally opened them, he turned to the Buddha and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Master," he said, "my heart feels heavy. Grief sits in my chest like a stone. I try to calm myself, but I feel as though I'm drowning in sorrow." The Buddha, seated nearby, looked at him with deep compassion and said, "Then breathe, Vapa, not just with the lungs, but with the heart. Each breath is a gift. Do not take it for granted. Feel each inhale as life entering you again. Feel each exhale as the soft release of what no longer needs to stay." The Buddha then told him of a woman who had lost her child and came to him weeping. She pleaded for a medicine to bring her son back. The Buddha asked her to find a mustard seed from a home untouched by death. She searched, but each household had its own grief, its own losses. Slowly, she came to see that sorrow lives in every human heart. She returned, not with a seed, but with understanding. Though she could not stop her pain, the Buddha said, she began to breathe again. And in each breath, she honored both the love she lost and the peace that still remained within her. Vapa closed his eyes and placed his hand on his chest. The Buddha continued, "The breath is always honest. It does not pretend, it does not hurry. It says only this: you are alive, here, now. Inhale, receive the miracle of this moment. Exhale, let go of what weighs you down. No thought is needed, no words, only breath." And so, Vapa sat in silence. He breathed slowly, feeling the air fill his chest like sunlight entering a darkened room. Each inhale felt like an embrace. Each exhale, a loosening of grief, one thread at a time. There was no sudden joy, no sudden healing, but something inside him softened, something surrendered, and in that soft rhythm of life and letting go, peace quietly returned. Be present with the sensation of tiredness. The day was ending over the plains of Magadha, and golden light spilled across the stone paths of the monastery. The Buddha, sat beneath a peepal tree, his eyes half closed in quiet awareness. A monk approached, weary and restless, and knelt before him with a sigh. "Master," he said, "I feel so tired, but I try to fight it. I tell myself I should be stronger, more focused, more disciplined. Sleep feels like defeat. There's so much to do, so much to fix in myself." The Buddha opened his eyes slowly and looked at the monk with deep compassion. "Do you think a candle that dims at dusk is failing?" he asked. "Do you expect the sun to shine without pause?" The monk lowered his gaze, unsure. The Buddha gently told him a story of a farmer who worked tirelessly from morning to night. He saw his neighbors resting beneath trees or enjoying their meals slowly, and he judged them as weak. "I do not stop," he would say. "I am stronger than they are." But over time, the soil he tilled grew dry, his hands blistered, and his spirit cracked with resentment. One day, he collapsed in the field. As he lay on the earth, too tired to move, he noticed something: the wind on his skin, the warm soil beneath him, the sky above, quiet and vast. In that stillness, he realized he had never really been with his body. He had only demanded things from it. The Buddha placed his palm over his own heart and said, "Tiredness is not weakness. It is your body whispering that it needs kindness. Do not turn away from it. Feel it fully, how your limbs grow heavy, how your eyes want to close, how the breath softens. Be with it as you would with a friend who is asking to rest." The monk closed his eyes as the words sank in. For the first time, he didn't resist the ache in his bones or the slow pull of his body downward. He felt the weight in his chest, not as a burden, but as a message. And in that gentle moment of surrender, he was no longer fighting himself. He was present, with his fatigue, his humanness, and his quiet need for rest. Do not identify with emotions. Let them pass. At the edge of the forest, as mist clung to the morning air, a young monk named Malika sat before the Buddha, his voice heavy with confusion. "Master," he said, "some days I feel joy and strength. Other days I feel fear, anger, even despair. When I'm joyful, I feel like I've found the path. But when I'm overcome with sorrow, I feel lost again. I don't understand who I really am." The Buddha looked toward the slow-moving clouds above the trees. "Malika," he said, "have you ever stood on the riverbank and watched the current carry leaves downstream?" "Yes," the monk replied. "Did you ever think the leaves were the river?" the Buddha asked. Malika shook his head. "No, Master. They only float on the surface. They come and go." The Buddha smiled softly. "Just as your emotions do. You are not your emotions. You are the river beneath them, the still, flowing presence that watches them pass." He shared the story of a man who believed each feeling defined him. When he felt anger, he called himself cruel. When he felt sadness, he called himself broken. When he felt happiness, he clung to it, terrified it would leave, and it always did. His life became a storm of self-naming, where every emotion became a fixed identity. One day, he met a teacher who said to him, "When the wind blows, do you become the wind? When the night falls, do you become the dark?" The man was silent. The teacher said, "Feelings are visitors. Treat them as such. Bow to them if you must, but do not let them unpack and live in your home." Malika listened deeply, his breath slowing. He had never realized how tightly he had clung to every passing feeling, as if each one proved something about who he was. But now he saw them as waves on the ocean's surface, rising, cresting, falling. And beneath the waves, something deeper remained untouched. The Buddha continued, "When joy comes, smile. When sorrow visits, offer it tea. But remember, none of them stay. Do not mistake the traveler for the path. Let them pass and remain in the stillness that watches." And so Malika sat once more in meditation, not trying to fix, not trying to hold, not trying to name, just breathing and watching and letting each emotion pass like wind through an open window. Recite, "This too shall pass," in moments of distress. One grey afternoon, as dark clouds gathered over the village of Vesali, a woman arrived at the monastery gates with swollen eyes and trembling hands. She had walked for hours through mud and wind, carrying with her nothing but sorrow. When she reached the Buddha, she fell to her knees. "My life is breaking," she said through tears. "My husband is gone. My children are distant. My days feel hollow. I cannot bear this pain. It feels like it will never end." The Buddha looked at her, not with pity, but with the quiet strength of one who had seen suffering come and go like the rising and falling of tides. He helped her to her feet and led her beneath a tree where the wind stirred the leaves gently. He asked her, "When the rain comes, does it stay forever?" "No," she whispered. "And when joy visits," he asked, "can you keep it from leaving?" She shook her head, her eyes still wet. He then told her a story of a king who was known for his pride in times of triumph and despair in times of failure. Wanting to free himself from this cycle, he asked his wisest advisor for something that would steady his heart. The advisor gave him a ring with 4 simple words engraved inside. "This too shall pass." The king wore it always. In joy, it reminded him to remain humble. In grief, it reminded him to keep breathing. It became his anchor, his balance, his peace. The Buddha turned to the woman and said, "You do not need to stop the pain. You do not need to understand it. You only need to remember it is not forever. Everything in this world, both joy and sorrow, moves like a river. No feeling, no moment, no wound lasts forever." He invited her to sit and close her eyes. As the wind brushed across her skin, he asked her to breathe in and gently say to herself, "This too shall pass." Again, slowly, tenderly. And as she repeated the words, something loosened in her chest. Her grief did not vanish, but it softened. It no longer screamed. It sat beside her like a tired guest. And for the first time in many nights, she did not feel crushed by her sorrow. She simply held it, breathed with it, and let the wind carry the rest away. Envision your pain, dissolving with each breath. As dusk settled over the quiet grove, a soft orange glow bathed the trees. A woman named Sati, weary from travel and burdened by invisible wounds, came to the Buddha. She bowed low, her eyes filled with tears she had been holding for too long. "Master," she said, "I carry pain in my body and in my heart. It tightens in my chest, sits like a stone in my stomach. I try to be strong, to ignore it, but it follows me everywhere. I don't know how to let it go." The Buddha looked at her gently and motioned for her to sit beside him. Pain, he said, is not just in the body. It is held in the breath, in the thoughts, in the silent places we don't speak of. But you need not fight it. You can learn to soften around it. You can learn to breathe through it. He told the story of a potter who once dropped a pot that cracked. Ashamed, he tried to cover the crack with paint, polish, and cloth. But no matter what he did, the flaw remained. One day, a traveler passed by and said, "Why not place a flower inside the crack and carry it with care?" The potter, confused, tried it. In time, people came not for the pot's perfection, but for its beauty and truth. The pot still had a crack, but now it also held something gentle. "Sati," the Buddha said, "your pain is not weakness. It is a place to bring tenderness. Close your eyes, breathe in slowly, and with each inhale, imagine light entering your pain. With each exhale, let it carry away a little of your sorrow. Not all at once, just a thread, just a layer." She obeyed, trembling at first. As she breathed, she imagined her pain softening, becoming mist. With each breath, it rose from her chest like fog lifting from the earth. Her jaw loosened, her shoulders sank. The pain didn't disappear, but it no longer held her so tightly. The Buddha spoke softly. "Your breath is your medicine. Inhale with kindness. Exhale with release. Let the breath carry the weight for you. Let it dissolve what you no longer need to hold." And in that quiet, between breaths, Sati felt something new. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of peace. A peace that had waited patiently beneath the ache, ready to rise with each breath. Acknowledge your human vulnerability. As a soft drizzle fell over the hills near Kapilavastu, the Buddha sat beneath a tree, the scent of wet earth rising all around him. A young monk arrived, soaked from the rain, his robes clinging to his skin, his face flushed with shame. "Master," he said, barely meeting the Buddha's gaze, "I lost my temper today. I judged a fellow monk. I doubted myself in meditation. I thought I was past these weaknesses, but they return again and again. I feel like I am failing the path." The Buddha said nothing at first. He reached out and caught a raindrop on his finger. "Even the sky must weep," he said gently. "Why should you expect to be untouched by storms?" He told the monk a story of a sculptor who worked tirelessly to carve a perfect statue of the Buddha. Day after day, he chipped away at the stone, trying to smooth every line, to create something flawless. But no matter what he did, a small crack remained across the statue's chest. In frustration, he tried to hide it. But when the sun rose the next morning, the light passed through the crack and cast a golden beam across the temple floor. The people saw it and wept at its beauty. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "You think your vulnerability is a flaw to fix, but it is the place where light can enter. You were not born to be perfect. You were born to feel, to fall, to rise again. That is the very heart of being human." The monk closed his eyes and for the first time allowed himself to feel the rawness beneath the guilt, the sadness, the fear, the longing to be enough. He had spent so much time pretending to be strong, thinking that strength meant never stumbling, never needing, never breaking. But now he felt something more honest, a softness, a trembling truth. The Buddha continued, "When you stop running from your humanity, you begin to walk the true path. The path where compassion grows, not only for others, but for the one who lives inside your own chest. The monk breathed deeply, not to escape the feeling, but to sit with it. And in that breath, in that quiet acceptance of his own fragile heart, he found a kind of peace he had never known, one that did not ask him to be perfect, only real. Bow mentally to the day's lessons. As the stars emerged one by one in the dark velvet sky, the monastery slowly fell into silence. A young monk named Jiva approached the Buddha after evening meditation. His face was weary, not from the day's labor, but from the weight of his own disappointment. "Master," he said, "I feel like I've wasted this day. I made mistakes, I lost my temper, and I failed to complete my tasks. I want to move on, but I keep replaying everything I did wrong." The Buddha looked at him with soft eyes and said, "Jiva, when you walk through a forest, do you expect not to stumble over roots or thorns? Do you curse the forest for teaching you where the path is rough?" Jiva said nothing, but his eyes began to well with tears. The Buddha told a story of a woman who, each night, wrote down all the things she regretted. Her book grew thick with judgment, and her sleep was restless. One night, an old monk gave her a new practice. "Instead of writing your failures," he said, "write what each moment taught you, even the difficult ones." She began to reflect differently. A harsh word taught her the need for patience. A forgotten duty reminded her to be more present. A missed opportunity revealed her fear. Slowly, her list became not a record of shame, but a collection of lessons. And as she bowed her head each night, she no longer feared the day, she honored it. The Buddha turned to Jiva and said, "We are not here to live perfectly, but to live awake. Every stumble, every misstep, every hard moment is the world whispering, 'Learn from this. Bow to it, not in shame, but in reverence.'" Jiva closed his eyes. He saw the day not as a chain of mistakes, but as a path, twisting, uneven, real. He placed his hands together at his heart, not for punishment, but for gratitude. The Buddha's voice was gentle in the night air. "When the day ends, bow not to what you wish had happened. Bow to what did happen. Every moment has come to teach you something. Honor it, then rest." And so, under the quiet sky, Jiva bowed inwardly, not to his flaws, but to the wisdom hidden within them. And for the first time that day, he felt peace. Rest as an act of surrender, not failure. In the gentle hush of dusk, the monastery nestled among the trees began to fall into silence. The sound of birds quieted, lamps flickered in the hallways, and the sky blushed with the final light of day. A monk lingered outside the meditation hall, his face tense, his body slouched with fatigue. Though his eyes burned from lack of sleep, he refused to lie down. The Buddha passed by and paused beside him. "Why do you not rest, my friend?" he asked softly. The monk looked up, ashamed. "Because I haven't finished my practice today. I should be stronger, more disciplined. If I sleep now, it means I gave in. It means I failed." The Buddha sat with him on the cool stone steps and looked out at the darkening horizon. "Do you think the river fails when it stops rushing?" he asked. "Do you believe the tree is weak because it stands still?" The monk stayed quiet, heart heavy, the weight of his expectations pressing down on his chest. The Buddha told him a story of a warrior who journeyed far in search of wisdom. He walked for days without stopping, believing that stillness was weakness. He pushed his body, ignored his hunger, silenced his pain. One evening, he collapsed beside a stream, too exhausted to continue. As he lay there, he noticed the sky turning deep blue, the stars flickering to life, the sound of water running over stones. For the first time, he listened, and in that stillness, clarity arrived, not as something conquered, but something allowed. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "You think rest is a retreat from progress, but sometimes rest is the doorway. Surrender is not giving up. It is laying down the illusion that you must always be in control. Rest is trust. Rest says, I am enough as I am, even now." The monk felt something loosen inside, something he didn't know he'd been gripping. He realized how long he had been measuring himself by effort alone, afraid that pausing would erase all he had built. He laid down slowly on the stone, the sky above now scattered with stars. And for the first time, his rest was not haunted by guilt. It was quiet, true, and full of grace, like the earth receiving rain, with no need to prove its worth. Allow stillness to embrace you. It was the quietest hour of night, when even the wind seemed to sleep. A soft mist drifted through the trees of the monastery grounds. The Buddha sat beneath a Bodhi tree, his eyes half closed, serene as the earth itself. A restless monk named Silan approached, unable to find sleep. "Master," he whispered, "my mind keeps moving. Even when I sit still, my thoughts race. I think of tomorrow, of yesterday, of things undone and things that might go wrong. I sit in silence, but I don't feel still." The Buddha opened his eyes, slow and steady. "Silan," he said, "true stillness is not something you create. It is something you allow. It is already here, beneath the noise. You only need to stop running." Silan looked down, ashamed. "But I don't know how." The Buddha told him of a man who once tried to calm a pool of water by pressing it flat with his hands. The more he touched it, the more it rippled. Frustrated, he stirred it more, trying to force it into calm. But the water only grew more disturbed. Then a traveler came by, thirsty, and sat by the pool without doing anything. He waited. Slowly, the water settled. The reflection returned. The stillness came on its own. The Buddha turned to Silan. "Your mind is like that pool. You cannot press it into peace. You must let it be still. Sit, breathe, feel your body held by the earth. Let stillness find you." Silan sat down beside him. He let his shoulders fall. He placed his hands in his lap, not as a posture to achieve something, but as an offering to the present moment. He listened, to his breath, to the distant sound of crickets, to the silence between sounds. And then he began to feel it, a subtle hush, not forced, not chased, just there, a quiet that wasn't empty, but full of peace, full of presence, full of life simply being. The Buddha's voice came again, barely above a whisper. "You do not need to conquer the world, Silan. You do not need to conquer your mind. You only need to rest. Let go of the struggle. Let stillness hold you, like the sky holds the stars. And in that moment, wrapped in night and quiet, Ceylan was no longer trying. He was simply here, still, held, enough. Smile slightly to soften the heart. As the sun rose slowly over the hills of Savatthi, casting golden light across the earth, the monks began their morning meditations. Among them sat a young novice, his brow furrowed, his jaw clenched tight. Though his eyes were closed, his body was stiff, his breath shallow. He was trying desperately to be calm. The Buddha, walking quietly among the seated monks, paused beside him. He placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You are sitting like a stone, trying to become a flower. Why such tension?" The novice opened his eyes, frustrated. "I want to be peaceful. I'm trying to silence my mind, to control my thoughts, but nothing changes. My heart still feels hard." The Buddha sat down beside him, not to correct him, but to guide him. He said, "Peace does not come through force. The heart does not open through struggle. Sometimes all it needs is a little kindness. Even a simple smile can begin to melt what has grown cold." He then told the story of an old monk who had spent years trying to master his emotions through discipline alone. He fasted, sat still for hours, avoided pleasure, and believed that sternness was the path to awakening. But no matter how deeply he meditated, he could not feel love, not for himself nor for others. One day, as he watched a child laugh while playing with a leaf, something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth turned upward, just slightly. And in that small smile, something cracked open. Warmth, softness, a quiet joy that asked for nothing. The Buddha turned to the novice and said, "Smile, not to pretend everything is fine, but to remind your heart that it is safe. Even the smallest smile can say to the body, 'You are allowed to relax now.'" The young monk closed his eyes again. This time, he let his lips lift just enough to feel the difference. It wasn't forced. It wasn't for show. It was for himself. As if, deep within, he was whispering to his own heart, "You are doing your best, and that is enough." And with that, the tension began to fade. His breath deepened. His thoughts slowed. The world didn't change, but something inside did. It was small. It was quiet, but it was real. Use nighttime to reconnect with inner peace. The stars shimmered high above the dark hills, and the forest had fallen into a sacred hush. In the gentle glow of lantern light, the monks finished their evening chanting. But one young monk, Anula, lingered by the edge of the meditation hall, unable to settle his thoughts. His eyes were tired, but his mind raced with worries from the day. The Buddha, noticing the tension in the boy's shoulders, walked over quietly and sat beside him. "Anula," he said softly, "why do you not rest?" Anula looked down. "My thoughts won't let me. I replay conversations, regrets, tasks left undone. I feel I should have done better. It's like the day follows me into the night, and I can't escape it." The Buddha listened with great stillness, then said, "The night is not a place to carry the day. It is a doorway, one you may walk through if you allow it." He told a story of a man who worked tirelessly from sunrise to sunset. At night, he brought his worries home, unpacked them like heavy stones, and arranged them by his bed. He believed that by holding on to them, he could control tomorrow. But each morning, he woke weary, his spirit dimmed. One night, while walking through the forest, he saw the moon's reflection dancing on a still pond. The forest was silent, the trees unmoving. In that moment, he understood. Peace is always there. It is not made. It is returned to when we let the noise fade. The Buddha turned to Anula. You do not need to solve the day at night. You only need to return to what has always lived beneath the noise, your peace. Night is the breath of the earth. Let it soothe you. Let it carry you inward. Anula closed his eyes. He listened to the quiet around him, the distant call of an owl, the rhythm of his breath. He felt the darkness not as emptiness, but as a cradle. The rushing thoughts began to slow. He did not need to chase solutions or fix the past. He only needed to soften into now. The Buddha's voice whispered gently, "Let night be your temple. Let go, breathe, and return to the stillness that has never left you." And beneath the stars, Anula finally allowed the darkness to hold him, not as something to fear, but as something sacred. Peace, quiet and ancient, waited patiently as he closed his eyes and came home to himself. Let go of expectations of perfection. In the quiet of early morning, mist curled through the garden paths of the monastery like silk. The air was cool, the ground damp with dew, and a hush rested over the land. A young monk sat alone by the edge of the lotus pond, his robes neat, his back straight, his expression troubled. The Buddha approached softly and sat beside him. The monk didn't speak at first. His eyes were fixed on a single lotus flower, still unfolding with the sun. Finally, he said, "Master, I try every day to follow the teachings perfectly, to meditate without distraction, to speak only with kindness, to act without ego. But I fail. I make mistakes. I feel like I'm not worthy of this path. I thought I would be better by now." The Buddha gazed at the lotus, slowly opening, touched by morning light. "Do you see how the flower blooms?" he asked. "Not all at once, not because it is flawless, but because it rises from the mud, little by little, day by day." He told the story of a potter who spent months trying to create the perfect clay bowl. Each time he saw a flaw, a small crack, a tilt in the shape, he would break the bowl and begin again. His hands grew tired, his heart heavy. One day a traveler came to him and said, "Let me see the bowl you call imperfect." The potter showed him a piece with a crooked rim, a slight curve in its base. The traveler smiled. "It fits my hands exactly. Its flaw is its beauty. It tells a story." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Perfection is not the way. Wholeness is. And wholeness includes the parts of you still learning, still healing, still growing. Let go of the weight of becoming flawless. That burden is not yours to carry." The monk looked down at his hands, tired from effort, aching from self-judgment. He realized he had been shaping himself like the potter, never allowing the small cracks to be part of his humanity. He thought he needed to be pure, to be peaceful. But now, sitting beside the lotus and his teacher, he saw something deeper. The path is not a straight line, and the traveler is not meant to be without scars. He exhaled slowly, and in that breath, let go, not of the effort, but of the expectation. And that too was enough. Welcome dreams as messengers. In the cool hours before dawn, as moonlight spilled softly through the forest canopy, a quiet unease stirred in a novice monk named Parisa. He approached the Buddha with eyes full of worry, his hands twisting in his robes. "Master," he said, "my dreams trouble me. Sometimes they bring strange images, people I've never met, fears I thought I had let go of, even joy that feels out of place. When I wake, I feel shaken or confused. What do these dreams mean? Should I ignore them?" The Buddha looked at him gently and replied, "Parisa, when a traveler knocks at your door in the night, do you hide, or do you open the door and listen?" "I listen," the monk said quietly. The Buddha nodded. "Then do the same with your dreams. They are not meaningless. They are not commands. They are whispers from the deeper waters of the mind. Not every dream is clear, but each carries something: unspoken truth, buried sorrow, unmet longing. Do not fear them. Welcome them as messengers." He shared the story of a young woman who dreamed night after night of walking through a burning house. She would wake, breathless, confused, certain something was wrong. She tried to forget it, dismiss it, but it returned again and again. Finally, she sat in meditation and asked herself, "What am I refusing to see?" And in that stillness, she realized the house was not a warning from the outside. It was her own body, her own heart, filled with unspoken grief she had hidden for years. The dream had come not to frighten her, but to help her listen. The Buddha turned to Parisa and said, "The mind speaks in dreams when it cannot speak in daylight. Listen, not with fear, but with kindness. Let the images rise and fall. Ask, 'What are you trying to show me?' and then release them, as one releases a letter once read." Parisa closed his eyes, no longer trying to control or erase the dreams, but ready to greet them. He did not need to make them into prophecies, nor push them away. He simply needed to witness them, with the same gentle awareness he brought to his breath. The Buddha's voice softened like wind through the trees. "Dreams are not chains. They are doors. Open them with care and walk through slowly." And as Parisa returned to his rest, he no longer feared what might rise in sleep. He welcomed it, knowing that even the strangest dream could be a lantern in the dark. Replace worry with gentle curiosity. One late afternoon, as golden light spilled through the open windows of the meditation hall, a quiet tension hung in the air. A young monk sat with furrowed brows, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. Though his eyes were closed, his thoughts raced like a wheel spinning too fast. When the session ended, he approached the Buddha with a troubled face. "Master," he said, "I keep worrying about everything. What if I'm not progressing? What if I fail? What if something terrible happens tomorrow? My mind spins with fear, and I try to stop it, but it only grows louder." The Buddha smiled gently, his gaze as calm as still water. "Worry," he said, "is like a child crying in the dark. The more you ignore it or scold it, the louder it becomes. But if you turn toward it with kindness, it begins to soften." He told the monk a story of a traveler who came to a fork in the road. One path was familiar, but long and difficult. The other was unknown, winding into a foggy forest. The traveler stood frozen, asking himself, what if the forest holds danger? What if I get lost? What if I never return? Hours passed, and he stood in the same place, consumed by fear. Then an old woman appeared and asked him, why not walk forward with curiosity instead of fear? The path will reveal itself only to those who take the first step. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, instead of asking, what if it goes wrong? Ask gently, what is this feeling trying to show me? Instead of fearing your thoughts, observe them as if you were meeting them for the first time. Curiosity does not rush, it does not judge, it simply says, let's see what this is. The monk closed his eyes and listened inwardly. A worry appeared. What if I am not good enough? But instead of pushing it away, he tilted his mind toward it, like a bird turning gently toward the wind. He asked, not with panic, but with softness, what is this worry made of? Why is it here? What is it teaching me? And suddenly, the worry lost its grip. It became lighter, almost like a friend that had only ever wanted to be heard. In that space, the monk breathed deeper, not because the answers arrived, but because fear no longer demanded them. He had replaced fear with wonder, and wonder, the Buddha reminded him, was the beginning of peace. Rest in awareness, not effort. In the quiet hours after evening chants, a soft breeze moved through the temple grounds, rustling the lantern flames and leaves alike. A young monk named Devata remained seated long after the others had left. His back was straight, his breath deep, but his jaw was tight, and his brow furrowed with quiet frustration. The Buddha approached and sat beside him, the silence between them as calm as the night sky. After a moment, Devata spoke. "Master," he said, "I try to meditate as you've taught. I focus on my breath, I repeat the words, I hold my posture, but I feel no peace. The harder I try, the more restless I become. Am I doing something wrong?" The Buddha looked at him with kindness and said, "Devata, if a bird tries to fly by beating its wings harder and harder, will it find peace? Or will it tire and fall from the sky?" The monk was silent. The Buddha continued, "You are trying to force stillness, but awareness is not something you chase. It is something you return to. It is always here. You do not need to build it. You only need to stop building everything else." He told the story of a man who sought enlightenment by climbing a great mountain. He pushed himself day and night, barely sleeping, always climbing higher. At the top, he found only clouds and wind. Frustrated, he sat in exhaustion and wept. A shepherd boy nearby offered him a bowl of warm food and said, "Peace doesn't live at the top of the mountain. It lives in the one who stops to listen." The Buddha turned to Devata. "Meditation is not a task to complete. It is a space to rest in. Let go of trying. Just sit and let the breath breathe itself. Let the sounds be sounds. Let the thoughts pass like wind through an open field. Do nothing, but be fully aware." Devata's shoulders began to soften. He felt how tightly he had been holding on to the idea of peace, as if it were a prize he had to earn through effort. But now he understood. Peace was not a reward. It was what remained when effort fell away. The Buddha's voice was almost a whisper. Let awareness be your resting place, not as something to control, but something to allow. Do not strive to be still. Simply stop moving. and stillness will find you." And so, Devata sat again, not striving, not resisting, just resting in the quiet awareness that had always been there, waiting for him to remember. Practice equanimity toward your struggles. As the sun dipped below the mountains near the ancient city of Rajagaha, painting the sky in soft oranges and violets, the monks gathered for evening reflection. One monk, his robe worn thin from years of practice, sat alone, shoulders tense, eyes filled with quiet frustration. The Buddha noticed his unrest and came to sit beside him on the warm stone. After a moment of silence, the monk said, "Master, I've been on this path for so long, but still I struggle. My anger returns, my doubts return. Some days I feel peaceful, and the next I feel as if I've gone backward. I don't understand why the struggle won't end." The Buddha reached down and picked up a smooth stone worn by the river. He held it in his palm. "This stone," he said, "was once jagged, but the river did not force it to change. It simply flowed over it, day after day, without resistance, without hurry." He told the monk a story of a farmer whose land was struck by drought, then flood, then pests. Each season brought hardship, and with each hardship, the farmer cursed the sky, the soil, and his fate. His neighbor, though suffering the same, remained calm. One day, the angry farmer asked, "Why do you not cry out at the unfairness?" The neighbor smiled and said, "I do not ask the storm to be gentle. I only ask myself to remain steady." The Buddha looked into the monk's eyes and said, "Struggle is not a sign you have failed. It is part of the path. The mind will rise and fall like the ocean. Equanimity does not mean you feel nothing. It means you meet each wave with balance, not pushing away pain, not clinging to peace, simply remaining present, steady, compassionate toward it all." The monk sat quietly, breathing in the fading light. His heart was still tired, but something shifted. He no longer needed to win the struggle or to fix himself tonight. He simply needed to stay with it, without fear, without self-blame. In that moment, he saw his inner storms not as enemies, but as passing weather. Painful, yes, but temporary. And within him, a quiet place emerged. Not free from struggle, but free from the need to escape it. A place that could hold sorrow and still remain whole. A place called equanimity. Feel sorrow without drowning in it. The rain fell gently over the temple roof as evening approached, each drop a soft echo of the world's quiet sadness. Inside the hall, a woman named Nira knelt before the Buddha. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried the heavy weight of grief. "My heart is broken," she said quietly. "I lost someone I loved. The sorrow comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crushing. I try to stay strong, to rise above it. But there are moments it feels like I'm sinking." The Buddha looked at her with deep compassion and said, "Nira, a river is deepest at its center. If you wade carefully, you may feel its pull, but you do not have to be swept away. Sorrow is like this. It runs through all human hearts. You cannot stop it, but you do not need to drown in it." He told her a story of a mother who came to him in anguish after losing her only child. She wept, begged, and pleaded for her suffering to be taken away. The Buddha gently asked her to bring him a mustard seed from a home that had never known loss. She searched all through the village, knocking on doors, and every family she met shared a story of their own sorrow. By the time she returned, empty-handed, her tears had changed. They were not gone, but they were quieter, softer, no longer filled with resistance. The Buddha said to Neera, "Your sorrow does not make you weak, it makes you human. Do not push it away. Let it move through you, like the wind, like the rain. Let it speak, let it soften you, but do not let it define you." Neera closed her eyes and placed a hand over her heart. She felt the ache there, sharp and tender. But for the first time, she did not brace herself against it. She breathed into the sorrow, gave it space, let it live without taking over. The Buddha continued, "You may carry sorrow like a bowl of water, steady, mindful. Let it ripple, but do not spill. Let yourself feel, but do not forget. You are more than what has been lost." And in that moment, Neera felt something shift. The grief was still there, but she was no longer drowning. She was floating, held not just by pain, but by presence, by breath, by something deeper than sorrow itself. Radiate loving kindness to your future self. The night had grown quiet in the monastery, nestled among the hills of Kosambi. Stars shimmered above, and the world seemed to exhale, resting in its stillness. A young monk sat alone beneath a tree, his eyes reflecting a sadness he could not name. The Buddha, passing nearby, noticed the weight in his gaze and sat beside him in silence. After a few moments, the monk spoke. "Master, I fear the days ahead. What if I fail again? What if I forget the teachings? What if I become someone I won't be proud of? My mind is filled with images of a future self I cannot trust." The Buddha listened patiently, then reached down and traced a circle in the soil with his finger. "Do you see this line?" he asked. "It is the same circle. No matter where you begin, it always returns to itself. What you feel now, your fear and your longing, will meet you again in some future moment. And when it does, it will ask only one question: will you treat me with love?" He then told the story of a hermit who lived alone in the forest, always preparing for what might come, storing food, fixing tools, sharpening his thoughts like weapons. He feared illness, loneliness, failure. But in all his preparation, he had never offered kindness to the one person who would live through every season, his future self. He met the future with dread, as if he would become his own enemy. Only when he fell ill and lay helpless under the trees did he whisper to himself, "I forgive you for not being ready. I love you still." And in that moment, his healing began. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "You fear who you might become. But what if, instead of fear, you sent kindness ahead of you, like sunlight reaching the path before your feet touch it? Each time you breathe, whisper silently to the self, 'You will be tomorrow. May you be safe. May you be strong. May you be gentle with your heart.'" The monk closed his eyes and placed a hand over his chest. With each breath, he imagined warmth, soft, golden, expanding forward through time, not pushing, not controlling, just loving the version of himself who would one day wake in a different morning with different thoughts, different pain, different hope. And in that quiet blessing, he no longer feared the future. He was already there, waiting with open arms. Trust that healing takes time. As the morning sun rose over the quiet hills, casting golden light across the monastery, an old monk named Renu slowly made his way to the Buddha. He walked with care, not because of age alone, but because his heart had been wounded for many years. When he sat before the Buddha, his voice was low, his words hesitant. "Master," he said, "I've done everything you taught. Meditation, compassion, patience, silence. But the pain in me hasn't gone. The memories still return. Some days I feel light, but others, I fall back into sorrow. I wonder if I'm broken beyond repair." The Buddha looked at him with deep understanding. "Renu," he said softly, "when you plant a seed in the earth, do you expect it to bloom by morning? Or do you wait, knowing the soil must do its work in silence and time?" The old monk's eyes glistened, but he said nothing. The Buddha continued with a story. Once, there was a man who found an injured bird in the forest. He carried it home, fed it, and cared for its wounds. But each morning he would shake the cage, frustrated that the bird had not yet flown. One day, an old woman saw this and said, "You feed its body, but wound its spirit. You must trust the bird to heal on its own time." The Buddha turned back to Renu. "Your heart is like that bird. You cannot rush it. Healing is not a straight path. It curves, it slows, it returns to old places. But with every breath, it moves. With every act of gentleness, it grows stronger." Renu bowed his head, tears falling freely now, not from despair, but from a long-held tension finally loosening. He had thought peace meant never feeling pain again, but now he saw the truth. Peace was walking with pain patiently, without trying to force it away. The Buddha placed a hand over his own heart. Healing is not loud. It happens in the quiet, like grass growing after winter. You may not see it, but it is happening. Every kind thought, every mindful breath, every time you forgive yourself, that is healing. And as Renu sat beneath the sun, feeling the warmth on his face, he no longer searched for a sudden end to his pain. He simply breathed, and with each breath, trusted that something deep within was slowly, quietly coming back to life. Imagine letting go like falling leaves. It was the season of change in the forests near Vaishali. Trees once lush with green had begun to turn gold, amber, and rust. The wind carried with it the scent of dry earth and gentle endings. One afternoon, as the Buddha and his disciples walked along a quiet wooded path, a novice monk walked behind, deep in thought, his heart heavy. Sensing his unease, the Buddha slowed his steps and asked, "What troubles you, child?" The monk replied, "Master, I try to let go of anger, of regret, of old wounds, but they stay with me. I tell myself to release them, but still they return. I feel like I'm failing because I cannot simply let them drop." The Buddha said nothing at first. He only raised his hand and pointed to a tree nearby. A single golden leaf released from a high branch and drifted down, spinning slowly in the wind before settling on the ground. Letting go, the Buddha said, is not tearing something away. It is not forcing yourself to forget. It is like that leaf. It loosens in its own time. The tree does not rush it. The wind does not push too hard. But when it is ready, it falls, not with fear, not with struggle, but with grace. He told a story of a woman who held tightly to a sorrow that had lived in her heart for many years. She clung to the pain, believing that if she let it go, she would dishonor what she had lost. But the weight of it made her shoulders ache and her breath short. One day, as she swept the leaves in her courtyard, she watched them fall, gently, without sound, without resistance. And she realized her grief, too, could be honored without being carried. She whispered, "Thank you. Now go." The Buddha turned back to the monk. "You do not need to force release. You only need to soften your grip. Let the emotions rise. Let the memories visit. And when they are ready to fall, let them. Watch them go like leaves in the wind, not as failures, but as part of the turning seasons of your soul." The monk closed his eyes. In his mind, he pictured his pain not as a stone to be thrown away, but as leaves, beautiful, spent, floating gently down. And in that moment, he let just one go. Not all, just one. And that, he realized, was enough for now. Chant mentally to calm the restless mind. Night had fallen over the monastery, wrapping the forest in quiet shadow. Inside the dim meditation hall, a young monk named Loka sat cross-legged, his body still, but his eyes wide with agitation. He had tried everything, watching his breath, letting go of thoughts, returning to silence, but his mind buzzed with noise, unfinished tasks, imagined conversations, old regrets. After the session, the Buddha approached and sat beside him, his presence as steady as a mountain. Loka bowed low and spoke with a strained voice. "Master, my thoughts won't stop. I try to quiet them, but the more I try, the louder they become. I feel like I'm battling my own mind." The Buddha listened, then gently asked, "Loka, when a horse runs wild, do you scream at it to stop? Or do you offer it a soft voice, a gentle hand, and guide it home?" The monk said nothing, his chest rising and falling with each unsettled breath. The Buddha told him a story of a traveler lost in a dense forest as night fell. The man's fear grew louder with every sound. In his panic, he ran blindly, deeper into the trees. Then he remembered a song his mother had sung to him as a child, simple, rhythmic, kind. He began to hum it softly, and though the darkness remained, the fear within him quieted. He stopped running. He sat, and in the presence of that soft chant, he found his way back at dawn. "Loka," the Buddha said, "when your mind grows wild, do not wrestle with it. Offer it a rhythm, a thread of sound to hold on to. Chant, not aloud, but in your heart. Choose a word, a phrase, a truth. Let it repeat with each breath, not to escape thought, but to guide it gently to stillness." The monk closed his eyes and began to repeat silently, "Peace, peace, peace." With each repetition, the noise in his mind softened, not vanished, but no longer sharp. The chant was like a gentle bell in a storm, something constant to return to, again and again. The Buddha placed a hand over his heart. The mind is not the enemy. It is a child that needs guidance. Let the chant be your lantern. Let it lead you through the dark, back to yourself. And that night, as the wind moved softly through the trees, Loka sat in stillness, not empty, but held by the quiet echo of his own inner voice, steady and calm. Understand that all emotions are temporary guests. One evening, as rain tapped gently on the roof of the monastery, the Buddha sat by the doorway, watching the clouds roll across the sky. A young monk approached quietly, his face pale, his eyes troubled. "Master," he said, "I feel overwhelmed. Some days I am filled with joy, and the next I sink into sadness I cannot name. I try to push the pain away, to cling to the moments of happiness, but nothing stays. Everything moves. It leaves me unsteady, like I'm living on waves." The Buddha nodded, still watching the clouds. "Have you ever seen travelers come and go from a village inn?" he asked. "They arrive with dust on their feet and stories in their eyes. Some stay for a meal, some for a night, but none remain forever. And still, the inn does not try to hold them. It simply opens its door." He told the monk the story of a man who built a house in the mountains. One winter, sorrow came and sat by his fire. The man tried to chase it out, but it stayed. In spring, joy arrived and filled the house with music. Then fear knocked, then love, then anger. The man began to see that none of them stayed forever. So instead of fighting them, he began to greet them at the door. He listened. He learned. And when they left, he bowed in gratitude, not because they were easy, but because they had passed through without destroying him. The Buddha looked at the monk and said, "Your emotions are not who you are. They are guests. Let them enter. Offer them a seat. Listen if they speak. But do not ask them to stay, and do not fear their coming. They will go as surely as they came." The monk closed his eyes. Inside him was a storm, doubt, sadness, restlessness. But now he pictured each one arriving at his doorstep like a traveler. He opened the door. He breathed. He let them in, not to take over, but simply to pass through. And in that space between welcome and goodbye, he found something steady, something untouched, a quiet host within him, grounded and whole, watching the guests come and go. It was there he chose to rest. Picture yourself embraced by boundless compassion. Night had fallen over the forest near Nalanda. A soft breeze moved through the tall grass, and the stars blinked gently in the sky like tiny, watchful eyes. Inside the monastery, the lamps had been dimmed, and the world seemed to whisper, "Rest." Yet one monk remained awake, sitting alone in the meditation hall, tears silently tracing his cheeks. The Buddha found him there, unmoving, his face full of quiet pain. Sitting beside him, the Buddha asked, "What brings such sorrow, my child?" The monk answered through his breath, "I feel unworthy. No matter how much I meditate, no matter how I serve others, there's a voice inside that tells me I am not enough, that I am broken, that something in me cannot be fixed." The Buddha closed his eyes for a moment and then spoke softly. "There is a vast field, greater than any you've seen, filled with warmth, light, and silence. It is the field of boundless compassion. It does not measure you. It does not judge. It only embraces." He told the monk a story of a boy who had fallen into a well. He cried for help, but no one came. Years passed, and he learned to live in the dark, believing he was meant to suffer. One day, a stranger passed by and heard the boy's voice. She reached down, not with judgment, not with questions, but with open arms and quiet love. When she lifted him out, she didn't tell him to be better. She simply held him. And for the first time, he wept not from pain, but from being seen. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Now close your eyes and see yourself not through the eyes of guilt or failure or fear. See yourself as one who longs to be whole. Imagine arms, not of flesh, but of light, wrapping around you. Feel a warmth that asks nothing, a presence that says, 'Even now you are worthy of love.'" The monk did as he was told. In his mind, he saw himself, small, tired, wounded. And yet, those arms of compassion held him anyway, not to fix him, but simply to stay. And in that embrace, a part of him that had long been frozen began to thaw. He was no longer alone. He was surrounded by love that had always been there, waiting for him to open his heart wide enough to receive it. Feel your pulse as a reminder of presence. In the quiet shade of a fig tree, the Buddha sat beside a small stream that moved slowly over smooth stones. The forest was still, the air warm, and the soft rustling of leaves felt like the breath of the earth itself. A monk approached, his face distant, as if caught somewhere far from where his body sat. "Master," he said, "my mind is always elsewhere. I worry about things that haven't happened. I revisit mistakes again and again. Even when I sit in meditation, I don't feel here. It's like I've become a shadow of myself." The Buddha looked at him with calm eyes and said, "You are not lost. You are simply not home. Come back." He then reached out and gently took the monk's wrist in his hand. "Feel this," he whispered. The monk felt it, the quiet, steady rhythm beneath his skin, a soft drumbeat echoing through his body. "Your pulse," the Buddha said, "is the song of this moment. It does not exist in yesterday. It does not race ahead to tomorrow. It only knows now. Each beat says, 'You are alive. You are here.'" He told the monk a story of a boy who wandered into the forest searching for truth. He asked the trees, the rivers, the animals to tell him what was real, but none could give him peace. One night, cold and hungry, he placed his hand on his heart and felt it pulsing, slowly, steadily, and he realized the answers he sought were not in faraway thoughts, but in the living rhythm of his body, the one thing that had never left him. The Buddha looked into the monk's eyes. "Whenever your thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind, place your hand on your chest. Feel the life moving in you. It asks for nothing. It proves nothing. It simply is. That is presence. That is your anchor." The monk closed his eyes, placed his palm over his heart, and felt it, soft, steady, faithful. Not loud, but certain. Not demanding, but real. In that quiet rhythm, he found a doorway back to himself. He didn't need to think less. He just needed to feel more. And in that small, pulsing beat, he returned, fully, gently, completely, to now. Forgive the mistakes made in survival. The moon hung low over the quiet fields of Shravasti, casting soft light across the monastery walls. The air was still, yet heavy with unspoken stories. A middle-aged layman had come to the Buddha that night, his eyes hollow, his body thin from years of hardship. He knelt with trembling hands and said, "Master, I've done things I cannot speak aloud. When my family was hungry, I stole. When I was afraid, I lied. I turned away from those who needed me. I wasn't a good man. I was just trying to survive. How can I ever find peace when my past is filled with shame?" The Buddha looked at him for a long moment, not with judgment, but with deep, knowing compassion. "Tell me," he said, "if a man were lost in the desert with no water and no food, and he drank from a muddy stream just to stay alive, would you punish him?" The man shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "I would understand." The Buddha nodded. "Then why do you strike your own heart for doing the same?" He told the story of a bird caught in a storm. Wind tore its feathers and it crashed to the ground, wings broken, trembling with fear. In desperation, it crawled through the mud, seeking any shelter, any warmth. It survived, not with grace, but with instinct. Years later, when it flew again, it still carried the scars. But the scars did not mean it was wicked. They meant it had lived. "Many act out of love, twisted by fear," the Buddha said gently. "Hunger, grief, loneliness, these are not excuses, but they are truths. You are not trying to harm others, you are trying not to disappear." The man bowed his head, tears rising, breath shaking. He had carried his guilt like chains for years, believing he had ruined himself forever. But now, a small space opened in his chest, a place where kindness could enter. The Buddha placed his hand over the man's heart. "Forgive the one who was scared. Forgive the one who chose wrongly just to stay alive. That version of you was not evil. He was simply trying not to fall." And in the silence that followed, the man wept, not in punishment, but in release. Not because he was perfect, but because he was finally allowed to heal. Close your eyes with reverence, not fear. Night had gently settled over the forest monastery near Nalanda. Crickets began their song, and the warm wind carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows. In the dim glow of the oil lamps, the monks prepared for rest, but one remained seated, back straight, eyes wide, refusing to close them. The Buddha, passing through the quiet hall, noticed the young monk's stillness. He sat beside him and asked softly, "Why do your eyes remain open when the body calls for sleep?" The monk hesitated, then answered, "Master, when I close my eyes, I feel uneasy. Thoughts rise, images, memories, fears. It feels like stepping into darkness, like letting go of control. I don't know what will appear there. I fear what I can't see." The Buddha nodded, listening without interruption. Then he said, "When you bow your head to sleep, you are not falling into darkness. You are returning to the temple within." He told a story of a candle maker's daughter who feared the night. Each evening, as the sun sank, she would light every lamp in their home, hoping to chase away the unknown. One evening, the power failed, and no flame could be lit. In her fear, she sat alone in the dark, crying, trembling, waiting. But slowly, something strange happened. She began to notice the sound of her breath, the way her heartbeat echoed in her ears, the soft warmth of the floor beneath her. In that deep, soundless space, she discovered not terror, but tenderness. The dark was not empty. It was holding her. The Buddha looked at the monk and said, "To close your eyes is not to shut the world out. It is to return to the world within. It is not blindness, but trust. You are not surrendering to chaos. You are surrendering to stillness. He placed a hand gently on the monk's back. Tonight, when you close your eyes, do it not with resistance, but with reverence, as if you are entering a sacred temple. Bow inward. Let the darkness be a soft robe around you, not a prison. There is peace waiting there if you stop running from it. The monk nodded slowly, tears forming but not falling. He lay down, and this time he let his eyelids fall not like shields, but like petals closing at dusk. And in that darkness he was not afraid. He was home. Let go of mental commentary. In the dim light of dawn, the monastery was wrapped in silence. A soft breeze rustled the leaves outside, and the first birds had just begun their morning song. Inside the meditation hall, a monk sat cross-legged, his face tense, his breath uneven. Though he sat still, his mind was anything but quiet. When the Buddha entered and saw the strain in his eyes, he sat beside him without a word. After some time, the monk opened his mouth and said, "Master, I cannot stop judging everything. As I meditate, I think, this is not deep enough. I'm not doing it right. My mind is too noisy. Even when I try to be still, I hear this voice, constantly narrating. It exhausts me." The Buddha smiled gently. "The mind," he said, "is like a man standing by the river, endlessly commenting on the water. This one flows too fast," he says. "This one is dirty. This one is calm." But he never touches the water. He never feels it. He told the story of a woman who spent her days talking to herself, endlessly analyzing her every step. When she walked, she told herself how she looked. When she ate, she judged the taste, her posture, her thoughts. One day, she met a blind musician who played the flute in the street. He did not describe the world. He lived inside its sound. His music was pure presence. The woman listened and, for the first time, felt something deeper than thought. She cried, not because she understood, but because, for a moment, she had stopped trying to. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Let go of the voice that needs to name, fix, compare. You are not the voice. You are the awareness underneath it. Each time you hear it rise, this is wrong, this is not enough, smile gently. Do not fight it. Just return to the breath, to sensation, to silence." The monk closed his eyes again. The voice returned. "You're still thinking. This isn't working." But now he didn't chase it or argue. He simply noticed it, like a bird passing overhead. And then he returned to his breath. In, out. The sound of wind, the weight of his body, the coolness of the floor. The voice grew softer, not gone, but no longer in control, and in its place a quiet space appeared, wordless, wide, free. Replace inner noise with mindful silence. As dawn crept gently across the horizon, the world outside the monastery stirred with soft life. Birds calling to the light, leaves rustling in a breeze not yet warm. Inside the meditation hall, a monk sat with his head bowed, his breath shallow, his thoughts racing. Though the room was quiet, his mind was loud. Questions, doubts, worries, all churning like storm clouds beneath his skin. The Buddha entered silently and sat across from him. For a while, he said nothing, only watched, only listened. Then, without raising his voice, he spoke. Sometimes, the loudest noise comes from within. The monk opened his eyes. "Master, I cannot quiet my mind. It speaks constantly about things I should do, things I should have done, fears, regrets, planning, replaying. It is endless. Even in silence, I feel like I'm shouting at myself." The Buddha nodded gently. "The mind is like a restless bird, always flapping, always looking for somewhere to land. But it is not the noise that harms you. It is the belief that you must follow every sound." He told the story of a man who lived beside a bustling market. Each day he would cover his ears, yell at the merchants, and curse the chaos. But one day a traveling monk arrived and sat silently near the market's edge. Though the noise swirled around him, he remained unmoved, as if it belonged to a different world. The man asked, "How do you remain so still in the middle of all this noise?" The monk replied, "Because the silence I listen to does not come from outside. It is already within me." The Buddha looked into the monk's eyes and said, "Mindful silence is not the absence of sound. It is the stillness beneath it. You do not need to stop your thoughts. You only need to stop believing every one of them matters." He then invited the monk to breathe, not to fix, not to force, but to simply feel. Inhale, exhale. With each breath, the inner noise softened, not gone, but no longer shouting, just distant, just passing. And as the monk sat, he began to sense it. Not a perfect quiet, but a spaciousness, a gentle pause between thoughts, a silence that welcomed him back, not as a demand, but as a resting place. He had not silenced the world, he had simply stopped fighting it, and in that surrender, peace returned. Be as kind to yourself as you would a dear friend. The sun was setting over the river near the monastery at Jetavana, casting a golden glow across the water. The Buddha sat with a small group of disciples, their robes brushed gently by the evening breeze. One monk, young and earnest, sat apart from the others, his expression dark with shame. When the Buddha approached, the monk confessed softly, "Master, I spoke harshly to another today. I feel sick with regret. I keep telling myself I should have known better, that I'm not worthy to walk this path. I cannot forgive myself. I don't deserve kindness, not after the things I've said and done." The Buddha sat beside him, watching the river flow. He picked up a small cup and dipped it into the water, then gently poured it out. "Do you see how the river does not hold on to anything?" he said. "It receives what comes and it lets go. That is its nature. Your heart can be the same." He told the story of a traveler who stumbled and fell while crossing a bridge. Bloodied and embarrassed, he stood up and began to strike himself with his walking stick. A villager saw him and rushed forward. "Why are you punishing yourself?" she cried. "The fall was enough pain. What you need now is care." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "If a dear friend came to you in tears, full of sorrow for a mistake, would you speak to him as you now speak to yourself?" "No," the monk whispered. "I would hold him. I would tell him it's okay, that he's still good." The Buddha looked into his eyes and said, "Then do the same for yourself. You too are worthy of gentleness, You too are still good, even when you stumble, even when you forget." The monk closed his eyes and imagined it, not the scolding voice he had grown used to, but a softer one. A voice that said, "It's okay. You're learning. You are allowed to begin again." For the first time, he placed a hand on his own heart, not as a judge, but as a friend. And in that quiet gesture, something inside him began to heal, not from being perfect, but from being seen, forgiven, and loved, just as he was. Let the breath lull you like waves. Night had fallen over the monastery by the sea, and the sound of waves rose and fell gently in the distance. A soft breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying with it the scent of salt and moonlight. Inside the hall, the Buddha sat in quiet reflection as a weary monk approached and knelt beside him. "Master," the monk whispered, "my thoughts won't let me rest. I lie down to sleep, but my mind keeps swimming. I drift for a moment, then fall back into worry. It feels like I am sinking in my own thoughts." The Buddha looked toward the ocean, then back at the monk with steady eyes. "The sea never resists its waves," he said. "It lets them rise and lets them fall." He told the monk a story of a child who lived near the shore. Each night, she would lie on the sand, eyes closed, listening to the sound of the waves. No matter how loud her day had been, how many things had gone wrong, the rhythm of the sea would soothe her. Not because it was silent, but because it was steady. She said the waves reminded her how to breathe when she forgot. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Your breath is like the ocean. It does not need to be controlled, only trusted. When the mind begins to race, do not chase it. Return to the tide within you." He guided the monk to close his eyes. Inhale, like the wave rising to the shore. Exhale, like the wave gently rolling away. The monk followed slowly. At first, his breath felt shaky, uncertain. But with time, it found a rhythm, soft, natural, constant. The thoughts still came, but they no longer pulled him under. They floated above, like boats drifting on a vast sea he no longer needed to control. The Buddha whispered, "Let the breath carry you, like a boat rocking on gentle waters. There is no need to paddle, no need to reach the shore. Just rest in the motion. Let it soothe you. Let it hold you." And as the monk breathed in that rhythm, in and out like waves, he felt something he had long forgotten: the safety of surrender. Not sleep forced by exhaustion, but rest given by trust. In the soundless space between each breath, he began to drift, not away, but inward, where peace was already waiting. Sense the spaciousness of now. It was the quiet hour just before dawn, when the sky is still dark, but already beginning to loosen its grip on night. A soft mist lingered over the monastery fields, and the air felt wide, as if the world was holding its breath. Inside the meditation hall, a monk sat, eyes closed, body still, but his mind wandered far. He opened his eyes and found the Buddha seated nearby, watching the fading stars. "Master," the monk said softly, "I try to be present, but I keep slipping into memories, into plans, into fears. My thoughts are so loud that the present moment feels small, like a narrow space I can't stay in." The Buddha turned toward him with a gentle smile. "You believe the present is a tight rope you must balance on," he said, "but it is not. The present is not small, it is vast. You are not confined by it, you are held by it. He told the monk a story of a man who spent his life chasing moments he believed would bring him peace. He longed for the perfect future and grieved a past he could not change. One day, he stopped beneath an open sky, weary and breathless. There, he noticed the wind on his face, the sound of leaves stirring, the warmth of the sun on his skin. For the first time, he was not in yesterday or tomorrow. He was simply here. And it felt like standing in the middle of a wide, open field with nothing pressing against him. The Buddha placed his hand gently on the ground. The now is not a prison, he said. It is a field without walls. When you are fully in it, there is no fear, no weight of past or future. There is only space, soft, silent, generous. The monk closed his eyes again, this time not trying to force presence, but to feel it. He let his breath slow. He noticed the way his body rested, the way the floor supported him. He felt the cool air on his cheeks, the faint echo of birds beginning to stir. There was no task to complete, no judgment, no timeline. And in that stillness, he felt it. Not a tight moment, but a wide, open one. A silence that stretched in all directions. A now that had room for everything, yet asked for nothing. It was there, in the spaciousness of now, that his heart finally rested. Refrain from rehearsing the future. It was a still night in the hills of Sarnath. The moon hung low and full, casting soft silver light over the stone paths of the monastery. Most had gone to rest, but one monk sat awake beneath the Bodhi tree, his fingers anxiously tracing the edge of his robe. His breath was shallow, his eyes wide, not with wakefulness, but with worry. The Buddha, returning from a walk through the garden, noticed the tightness in his posture and sat beside him. "Your body is here," the Buddha said softly, "but your mind is far away." The monk nodded. "Master," he confessed, "I cannot stop imagining what might happen. What if I fail in my vows? What if I disappoint others? What if something terrible awaits tomorrow? I keep playing out every possibility. I try to prepare for everything, but still, I feel afraid." The Buddha looked up at the stars and then back at the monk. "When a bird builds 1,000 nests, where does it sleep?" he asked. The monk blinked in confusion. "Only in one." The Buddha nodded. "And yet, you are building nests in every branch of the future and trying to live in all of them at once." He told a story of a man who carried a sack of seeds into the wind, scattering them wildly in every direction. He wanted to ensure a good harvest, so he threw them far and wide, trying to control where they'd land. But the wind did not listen, and in his worry, he missed the fertile soil right beneath his feet. "You do the same with your thoughts," the Buddha said. "You try to shape what has not come. You try to live tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. But peace is never found in a place that does not yet exist." He placed his hand gently on the monk's chest. "Right now, you are safe. Right now, you are breathing. Let this moment be enough. When the future comes, you will meet it, but not now. Not tonight." The monk closed his eyes. His shoulders fell. He brought his awareness to the breath in his nose, The ground beneath his legs, the softness of the breeze brushing his skin. Thoughts still tried to rise, plans, what-ifs, images of things not yet real. But now he let them pass, like smoke on wind. And in their place, he found something he had not felt in days, the stillness of simply being alive. Not preparing, not predicting, just here, just now, just peace. See beauty in the simplicity of rest. As the sun dipped low behind the trees of the forest monastery, the world exhaled. Birds nestled into branches, leaves settled without wind, and the sky turned the soft color of fading gold. In this hush, a young monk swept the courtyard, his movements quick and tight, as if chasing away invisible tasks. The Buddha, watching from a shaded bench, called gently to him. "Come, sit," he said. "Let the broom rest. Let yourself rest." The monk hesitated. "But Master," he replied, "there is still work to do. I feel guilty if I stop while there is more to fix, more to clean, more to improve. I don't want to be seen as idle." The Buddha smiled, not in amusement, but in deep knowing. "Do you believe the flower is lazy for closing at dusk, or that the moon is weak when it does not shine all month long?" He then told the story of a carpenter who never rested. He worked day and night, building for others, carving wood until his hands ached and his eyes burned. His home was filled with tools, but empty of peace. One day, he passed a field where an old farmer lay in the grass, eyes closed, a simple smile on his face. "How can you lie there with so much to be done?" the carpenter asked. The farmer opened one eye and said, "Because even the earth pauses between seasons." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Rest is not an interruption of life. It is part of it. In rest, there is no need to prove, no striving, no comparing, just the soft truth that you exist, and that is enough." The monk sat down slowly beside him, still unsure but curious. He let his spine relax, his hands fall open, his breath find its own rhythm. Around him, nothing asked for effort. The wind did not demand. The trees did not measure him. The evening simply held him. And in that stillness, he began to notice what he had never seen in motion: the gentle sway of grass, the hush of wings overhead, the warmth of the ground beneath him. Beauty, not loud or grand, but simple, quiet, complete. He smiled, not to impress, not to perform, but because in that unguarded moment of rest, he remembered, this too is sacred. Let pain be part of your unfolding, not your identity. As twilight deepened over the quiet plains of Jetavana, the air grew cool and the sky turned to soft indigo. A gentle silence settled across the monastery, broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets or the rustle of leaves. A young monk remained seated near the edge of the garden, eyes cast downward, his body still but heavy with emotion. The Buddha approached, his presence calm as the evening itself. He sat beside the monk and waited. At last, the monk whispered, "Master, I carry a sorrow I cannot release. It lives inside me like a shadow. Sometimes I forget it for a little while, but then it returns. It feels like who I am now, like I've become my pain." The Buddha listened with great tenderness. He picked up a fallen petal and held it in his hand. "This once belonged to a beautiful bloom," he said, "but now it lies here, not lost, not worthless, just part of a new moment." He told the story of a potter who once broke his favorite clay vessel while moving it from fire to shelf. He wept for it, having poured so much of himself into its shape. He buried the shards beneath the soil behind his home. Months later, a rain came, and from that same earth, wild flowers grew, tall, bright, unexpected. The broken vessel had returned to the earth, and in doing so, gave birth to something entirely new. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Pain comes, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow. It touches the body, the heart, the memories. But pain is not your name. It is not your home. It is part of your path, part of your unfolding, but never the whole of who you are." The monk felt a tightness in his chest begin to ease. He realized he had been wrapping himself in his suffering, as if wearing it gave shape to his existence. But now he saw that pain could be honored, not clung to, not ignored, but held gently, like a part of a story still being written. "Let it shape you," the Buddha said. "Let it deepen your roots, but do not let it harden your spirit. You are not the wound, you are the one growing around it." And as the stars emerged in the sky above, the monk breathed in the cool night air, not to escape the ache in his heart, but to sit beside it, kindly, patiently, knowing it too would change, and that he would continue unfolding beyond it. Rest as an act of healing, lineage wounds. In the shade of an old banyan tree, its roots deep and twisted like ancient memory, the Buddha sat quietly while the wind stirred the air like breath through time. A monk approached slowly, his eyes heavy, not with sleep, but with the weight of something older, grief that had no clear name. "Master," he said, kneeling, "I feel tired in a way I cannot explain. Even when I sleep, the weariness remains. It's as though I carry not just my own struggles, but those of my parents and theirs before them. It feels endless." The Buddha looked at him gently, as if seeing beyond the surface, into the very bones of his fatigue. "Some burdens are not born in your lifetime," he said softly. "They are passed down like stories, like silence, like wounds that never had a voice. But rest, true, intentional rest, can be a way of ending that story with compassion." He told the monk a story of a woman whose mother had always lived in fear, rushing, working, never stopping, never sitting still. Her grandmother had been the same. Generations of survival had taught them to stay alert, to keep going, to prove their worth by their exhaustion. When the woman grew older, she began to do the same, until one day she lay down in the grass, feeling her heart beat slow, the sky above stretching wide. And something in her cracked open. A whisper, not from her own mind, but from all those who came before her. "Thank you for stopping. Thank you for resting for us." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "When you rest, you are not abandoning your path. You are mending it. You are saying to your ancestors, to your people, to the voices inside that only knew how to strive, we are allowed to stop. We are allowed to heal." The monk closed his eyes, and this time, when he allowed his body to sink into the ground, it was not just his own tension that softened. It was generations of pushing, of proving, of never feeling safe enough to rest. And in that moment, as the wind moved gently through the roots of the ancient tree, he became still, not in defeat, but in quiet victory. He had chosen what those before him could not. He had offered rest not just to his body, but to his blood. And that too was liberation. Breathe as if you are being breathed by the universe. The night sky stretched wide above the forest near Vulture Peak, stars blinking softly like distant lanterns. The earth was quiet, holding its breath in a stillness that felt sacred. Beneath a great tree, a monk sat with eyes closed, shoulders tense, trying to force his breath into calm rhythm. But the more he tried, the more restless he became. Sensing his struggle, the Buddha approached and sat beside him in silence. After a few minutes, he asked gently, "Why do you strain so hard to control something that was never yours to carry alone?" The monk opened his eyes, weary. "Master, I try to breathe mindfully as you have taught, but the more I try to guide the breath, the more anxious I become. It feels like a task, something I have to do." The Buddha reached out his hand and let it hover just above the monk's chest. "What if you stopped doing?" he asked. "What if you let yourself be breathed?" The monk frowned in confusion. The Buddha told a story of a child who stood on the edge of the sea, trying to hold a wave in her hands. Every time she cupped the water, it slipped through her fingers. Frustrated, she cried out, "I want to keep it." An old woman nearby smiled and said, "You don't need to hold the ocean, just float. It already knows how to carry you." The Buddha turned back to the monk and said, "Your breath does not begin and end with you. It is the wind in the trees, the tide in the sea, the rhythm of all life. You are not the master of it. You are its guest. Trust it. Let the universe breathe through you." The monk closed his eyes again. This time, he did not try to shape the breath. He simply noticed it, how it rose on its own, how it fell without effort. Each inhale arrived like a gift. Each exhale left like a blessing. He felt as if he were being rocked by something ancient and kind, not a technique, not a rule, but a living rhythm he had always belonged to. And in that surrender, the breath became sacred, not his, but shared, not controlled, but trusted. He no longer breathed alone. He was being breathed by the universe. Allow your suffering to soften, not harden, the heart. The sky over the Ganges turned a gentle grey as twilight settled in, and the world began to quiet. Along the banks, a monk sat alone, knees drawn close, face turned away from the river. The Buddha approached him slowly, sensing the heaviness in the air around him. The monk did not rise. He only said, "Master, I don't know what to do with this pain. It has made me bitter. I try to be kind, to stay open, but each time I'm hurt, I build another wall. I tell myself I'm just protecting my heart. But now, I feel more alone than ever." The Buddha sat beside him in silence, watching the current of the river move steadily, always forward. After a while, he spoke. "There was once a clay jar filled with water," he said. "One day, a crack formed along its side. The owner grew angry and tried to seal it with force, but every time he did, a new crack appeared. Eventually, the jar was abandoned. Years passed. A traveler found it, worn and leaking, but still holding some water. He lifted it and drank. "The water is warm," he said, "but sweet. I don't mind the cracks. It is still enough." The Buddha turned to the monk. "Pain will come. Betrayal, loss, disappointment. They are part of this world. But what matters is not whether the heart is broken. What matters is whether it stays soft. A closed heart may not break, but it cannot receive either." He told the monk of a tree that grew after fire had scorched the land. The others believed it was dead. But seasons passed, and the tree, blackened and hollow, began to bloom again, not because it had forgotten the fire, but because it allowed the rain to reach its roots. The Buddha placed a hand lightly on the monk's shoulder. "Let your suffering shape you, not shield you. Let it teach you how to feel deeply, not how to turn away. When your heart aches, do not close it. Place your hands over it. Breathe gently into it. Say, 'Yes, this hurts, but I will not become the hurt.'" The monk, eyes full, finally allowed himself to weep, not from weakness, but from a deep, hidden strength. He did not turn away from the pain this time. He met it, welcomed it, and let it move through him like rain through soil. And in that quiet letting go, his heart did not harden. It opened. Know that nothing is missing in this moment. The afternoon sun hung lazily over the hills of Anathapindika's grove, casting soft light through the trees. The wind was still, the world quiet. Yet one monk sat restlessly beneath a Bodhi tree, shifting often, his brow creased with dissatisfaction. The Buddha, passing nearby, paused and watched him for a moment. Then he asked, "What are you searching for in this stillness?" The monk sighed. "Master, I don't know. I sit here, I breathe, I try to be present. But it always feels like something is missing, like I'm waiting for a deeper peace, a brighter insight, a better version of myself. This moment feels incomplete." The Buddha knelt beside him and picked up a simple leaf that had just fallen. "Does this leaf wait to be more before it belongs?" he asked. "Does it ask for anything before it lets itself rest on the earth?" The monk looked at the leaf, puzzled. The Buddha told a story of a man who spent his whole life chasing fulfillment. He traveled from town to town, seeking teachers, books, wealth, love, anything that might give him the feeling of being whole. But wherever he went, there was always a quiet ache, a sense that something more was needed. One day, tired and worn, he sat beneath a tree, too exhausted to search anymore. As he breathed, birds chirped nearby, and the warmth of the sun touched his skin. In that silence, for the first time, he realized nothing was missing. It never had been. His longing had been chasing shadows, while truth waited quietly inside every ordinary breath. The Buddha looked at the monk with deep stillness in his eyes and said, "Peace is not hidden. It is not behind the next breath or beyond the next thought. It is here, in this very moment, when you stop measuring, fixing, and seeking." The monk closed his eyes. He listened to the rustle of leaves, the faint hum of insects, the beating of his heart. For once, he did not look for more. He did not try to make the moment better. And in that letting go, something simple but extraordinary revealed itself. The moment lacked nothing. It was whole. He was whole. Everything he needed was already here. Feel your body as a sacred vessel of presence. The midday sun filtered through the tall sal trees surrounding the monastery, casting shadows like soft fingers across the earth. Inside the meditation hall, a monk sat rigidly, his mind drifting far from his breath, far from his body. When the Buddha entered, he could sense the monk's tension, not loud, but tightly coiled within him, like a bowstring pulled too far. The Buddha sat beside him in silence, then asked, "Where are you right now?" The monk blinked. "Here, master, in the hall." The Buddha shook his head gently. "Your body is here, but you have left it behind. You live in thoughts, in plans, in regret. You have forgotten the gift of this body, the only place where presence truly lives." He told a story of a man who chased wisdom across many lands. He read every scripture, spoke to every teacher, climbed every mountain in search of truth. But still, he felt lost. One evening, a blind woman invited him to sit by her fire. She said, "You have eyes to see the stars, hands to feel the fire, feet to walk the earth, and yet you search outside what you already carry within." She reached for his hand and said, "Come back to where you are." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Your body is not an obstacle to awareness. It is the doorway. Each breath, each sensation, each heartbeat is a bell calling you home. Do not treat your body like a burden. It is sacred. It holds your joy, your grief, your peace, your life." The monk closed his eyes as the Buddha guided him. Feel your feet touching the earth, your legs supporting you, your hands resting, the rise and fall of your chest, the warmth of your breath. Be in this body, not to escape your mind, but to remember that presence lives here, not elsewhere. Slowly, the monk's tension softened. He felt his back, his heartbeat, the space behind his closed eyes, noticing, not analyzing, not correcting, just being. And with that awareness came a deep sense of reverence. His body, once forgotten in his quest for enlightenment, became a temple, not perfect, not still, but real, alive. And for the first time, he bowed, not to a statue, not to a scripture, but inward, to the sacred vessel he lived within. It was not just enough, it was holy. Offer yourself non-judgmental attention. The sun was beginning to set behind the tall trees of the forest near Savatthi, casting long shadows that danced quietly on the temple walls. The monks were returning from their arms round, their bowls empty, but their hearts full. One monk, however, lingered at the edge of the grove, his gaze lowered, his steps slow. When the Buddha noticed him, he walked beside him for a while before asking, "Why do your eyes not rise to meet the sky?" The monk replied, "Because I feel ashamed. I was distracted during my morning meditation. I forgot a verse during chanting. My thoughts were unkind. I try to improve, but all I see are my flaws. I do not know how to look at myself without disappointment." The Buddha stopped and placed a hand gently on the monk's shoulder. "You are looking at yourself through the eyes of punishment, not compassion. Can a wound heal if it is only struck again and again?" He led the monk to sit beneath a tree and told him the story of a painter who could never finish a single piece. Each time she neared completion, she would notice something wrong, an uneven line, a color slightly off, and tear the canvas apart. One day, her teacher said, What if you stopped correcting and started observing? What if, for just one painting, you simply paid attention to what was, without fixing, without judging? She agreed. She painted with care, but this time with gentleness. She allowed the brush to move, even when her hand trembled. She made space for the imperfections, and when she stepped back, she saw something she had never seen before: beauty, not in spite of the flaws, but because of her presence with them. The Buddha looked into the monk's eyes and said, "You do not need to approve of every thought. You do not need to erase every mistake. You only need to offer yourself the kind of attention that does not flinch or condemn, attention that stays, attention that sees." The monk closed his eyes and breathed in. This time, he did not try to improve the breath, or silence his thoughts, or push away the tightness in his chest. He simply noticed. "Here I am," he whispered inwardly, "and that is enough." And in that moment of soft awareness, the sharp edge of shame dulled. It did not disappear, but it no longer ruled him. It was just a part of what was seen and gently held. Imagine inhaling peace, exhaling fear. Dawn had just begun to brush the tops of the trees with gold as the mist lifted from the monastery gardens. In the stillness, a young monk sat alone beneath a Bodhi tree, his body trembling slightly with each breath. His hands were clenched in his lap, his face drawn with worry. The morning was quiet, but inside him a storm had taken root. The Buddha approached, sensing the invisible weight the monk carried. He sat beside him and placed his hand gently on the earth. "The ground beneath you is not afraid," he said. "It holds you, no matter what rises within." The monk looked at him, eyes wide and weary. "Master, fear visits me often. It tightens my chest and steals my breath. I try to push it away, but the harder I resist, the more it grows. How can I be calm when fear lives so deeply inside me?" The Buddha closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling slowly, deeply. "Do not fight fear," he said. "Breathe with it. Let the breath carry it out of you, like smoke rising, like dust lifting from stone." He then told a story of a boy who carried a jar of oil across a long path. With every step, he feared he would spill it. His eyes darted side to side, his heart pounded. But then an old monk walking beside him whispered, "Stop watching what might spill. Watch your breath instead." The boy obeyed. Step by step, breath by breath, his focus shifted. His fear softened. The jar remained steady, not because he feared less, but because he trusted more. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Let us begin together. As you inhale, imagine breathing in light, a soft warmth filling your chest, calming your thoughts. As you exhale, release the fear, as though the body is sighing it out. Inhale peace, exhale fear. No struggle, just rhythm." The monk closed his eyes. Inhale, peace. A soft warmth entered him, not dramatic, not forced, just quiet and kind. Exhale, fear. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to loosen his grip, enough to feel space. And with each breath, the storm within began to move, not out of control, but out of focus. What remained was not emptiness, but calm. He was not fearless, he was breathing, and in that breathing, he was safe. Trust in the rhythm of nature within you. It was early spring in the forests near Vesali. The trees were just beginning to wake, their first buds soft and green, trembling in the breeze. A gentle rain had passed, leaving the earth fragrant and the air quiet. In that peaceful setting, a young monk approached the Buddha, a frown creasing his forehead. "Master," he said, "I don't understand myself. Some days I feel steady and peaceful. Other days I'm restless, tired, distracted. I try to force myself to be calm, to stay on the path, but it feels like I'm fighting my own mind." The Buddha led the monk to a nearby field where rows of rice had just begun to sprout. The young shoots pushed through the mud, fragile but alive. He knelt and touched the damp soil. "Do you tell the seed when to bloom?" he asked. "Do you scold the clouds for covering the sun?" The monk was silent. The Buddha continued, "There is a rhythm to all things. The tide rises and falls, the moon waxes and wanes. The tree does not grow tall in a single day, and the flower does not bloom by force. So why should your heart be any different?" He told the story of a woman who tended a garden behind her home. At first, she watered and trimmed every day, anxious for the plants to grow quickly. But the more she rushed, the more she disturbed the roots. One day, weary and frustrated, she stopped trying so hard. She simply watched, she waited, she trusted. And soon, in their own time, the blossoms came, not because she forced them, but because she gave them space to follow their natural rhythm. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "You too carry seasons inside you. There are times to grow and times to rest, times of clarity and times of fog. Your task is not to be in bloom every day, but to honor the rhythm within." The monk closed his eyes and placed a hand over his heart. He listened, not for perfection, not for control, but for something quieter, the slow, living beat of his body, the breath rising and falling like waves, the soft truth that he was part of something ancient and wise. And in that silence, he no longer felt behind or broken. He felt in tune, not fixed, not finished, but unfolding like everything in nature, in perfect time. Allow the night to be a sacred retreat. As the last embers of sunlight sank behind the hills of Sravasti, shadows stretched long across the land. The monastery, once humming with quiet activity, now settled into stillness. The air cooled, the wind softened, and the earth exhaled. Yet within the dim meditation hall, a monk sat upright, his body tense, his mind refusing rest. The Buddha entered quietly and knelt beside him. "Why do you not lie down, child?" he asked. The monk answered, his voice hushed but strained. "Night feels like a lost time, Master. I feel I should be using it, to reflect, to train, to finish all I did not complete during the day. If I rest now, I fear I am wasting it." The Buddha looked up at the sky, where the stars began to appear one by one. "The lotus closes at night," he said. "The moon does not shine in haste. The night is not for rushing. It is for returning." He told the story of a traveler who moved only during the day, afraid of what the night might reveal. He walked endlessly, exhausted, but could not stop. One evening, his path brought him to a quiet forest where he found a circle of monks sitting silently under the stars. They did not speak, did not chant, did not move. They simply sat with the night as if it were a friend. The traveler, curious and weary, joined them. In the deep silence, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Peace not earned, but offered. The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "The night is not the enemy of practice. It is the practice. It asks nothing but surrender. Not to sleep in escape, but to rest in reverence. To let go of doing and return to being." The monk closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the day still lingering in his chest. But this time he did not resist it. He let it settle like dust on still water. He imagined the darkness not as a void, but as a soft robe wrapping around his shoulders. And slowly he lay down, not in defeat, but in devotion. The night was no longer a blank space to be filled. It was a sacred temple, a quiet teacher, a place to be held. And in that sacred retreat, he finally allowed himself to be held by the world that needed nothing from him. Only his presence, only his breath, only his rest. Feel each breath as a renewal. The sun was setting over the hills of Rajagaha, casting long golden rays that made even the dust in the air seem sacred. The Buddha sat quietly near the edge of a river, the water flowing slow and smooth, reflecting the light like glass. A monk approached, weary from the day's journey, his shoulders slumped, his eyes dim. "Master," he said, "I feel worn out. Not just my body, but something deeper. Each day feels like a repetition. I rise, I eat, I meditate, I sleep, but I feel no change. It's as if nothing I do truly begins again." The Buddha looked at the river. "Do you see how the river never holds the same water twice?" he asked. "It flows moment by moment, ever new. You are the same. Each breath you take is not a repetition, it is a return." He told the story of a craftsman who built bamboo flutes. Each flute took days to shape, and no two were ever alike. When asked why he didn't use a mold to make them faster, the craftsman replied, "Because each breath of air deserves a new voice. Nothing that holds life should be made from sameness." The Buddha turned back to the monk and said, "Your breath is not a habit. It is life arriving, fresh, sacred, full of possibility. Each inhale is a beginning, each exhale a gentle letting go. Renewal does not come in great waves. It comes in this breath." The monk sat down beside him quietly. He closed his eyes, and he breathed. He followed the air as it entered his nose, filled his lungs, and expanded his chest. He felt the exhale, soft and steady, releasing tension from his shoulders, his neck, his heart, again and again. And then he noticed each breath wasn't like the last. Each had its own shape, its own feeling, some deep, some light, some easy, some slightly tight. But each one brought him back, not to where he had been, but to something alive, present, new. He had been waiting for change to come from outside. But now he felt it, gently unfolding inside him with every breath. No great miracle, just this small, constant gift. A quiet renewal, a silent beginning, and in that, enough. Invite peace with your last waking thought. The moon hung high above the monastery, casting silver light across the stone paths and sleeping trees. The world had gone quiet, No footsteps, no voices, only the soft breath of night. In a small room near the edge of the grounds, a monk lay awake, his eyes open to the ceiling, his thoughts spinning gently like a wheel that would not stop turning. The Buddha, sensing the unrest in the air, entered the room quietly and sat beside him. He spoke not with command, but with softness, as if not to disturb the silence too deeply. "Why does your mind stir when your body longs to rest?" he asked. The monk turned to him and whispered, "I lie here thinking about everything, what I said today, what I didn't say, what I should have done. Sometimes I dread waking up tomorrow with the same burdens. My last thoughts are heavy, Master, and they carry me into restless dreams." The Buddha nodded slowly, his gaze warm and still. "The mind at night is like a guest house," he said, "and the thought you let in last will stay until morning. Be mindful of who you welcome." He told the monk a story of a woman who tended a small garden. Each evening, she walked among her plants and whispered to them, not of worry or regret, but of gratitude. "Thank you for your growing. Thank you for resting. Thank you for being," she would say. Over time, even in the harshest weather, her garden flourished. The villagers asked her how she kept her plants so strong. She smiled and said, "I speak peace into the roots before sleep." The Buddha turned to the monk and said, "Let your final thought be a blessing, not a burden. As your eyes grow heavy, do not cling to what is undone. Do not replay the past or fear the morning. Instead, offer your heart these simple words: May I rest in peace. May all beings rest in peace. Let those words be the door you close gently behind you as you enter sleep." The monk closed his eyes, and in the quiet space between one breath and the next, he repeated the words slowly in his mind. "May I rest in peace. May all beings rest in peace." He felt the weight of the day begin to dissolve, not because it was solved, but because it was finally released. And in that final thought, soft, sincere, and full of light, he found the gateway to stillness. Not escape, but return. Not forgetting, but forgiving. Peace had been waiting all along, just behind the noise, waiting to be invited in. As this journey of gentle wisdom comes to a close, let your heart rest in all that you've heard. These teachings are more than stories. They are soft lanterns for the dark, guiding you back to presence, stillness, and compassion. You've been reminded to breathe deeply, to let go with grace, to forgive gently, and to honor your body as a sacred space. You've learned to welcome sleep, not as escape, but as a return to peace, to healing, to yourself. Each teaching has whispered a truth. You do not need to fix everything tonight. You only need to rest. So, as your eyes grow heavy, may your final thought be kind. May your breath be your anchor. May your heart soften like leaves in wind. You are not alone on this path. Peace is walking with you. If one story or one breath brought you comfort tonight, share it in the comments. What teaching touched your heart the most? Your words may be the light someone else is waiting for. And if this brought you peace, subscribe to the channel to receive more teachings like this. Gentle reminders, sacred pauses, and moments of healing right when you need them. Rest well. You are safe here.